Chapter 987. Who followed Yen Zhaoge's gaze and looked over. That was a vast, long, and mighty river. The river was as vast as the sea as one could only sigh at it. This river is known as the Dynasty River, a renowned water vein of the entire world beyond worlds. Yen Zhaoge said as he looked at the river, "I heard people of Golden Court Mountain mention it in the southeast." The source of the Dynasty River was not Circumference Mountain or the southern Blazing Heaven Territory, instead being the Central June Heaven Territory to the north, originating from the Central June Heaven Territory. It traveled southeast, traversing billions of kilometers as it passed through many places in the Central June Heaven Territory and the Southern Blazing Heaven Territory. Circumference Mountain was one of them, as the entire mountain range was directly split into two by the Dynasty River. After leaving Circumference Mountain, the Great River continued heading south. The Great River between the mountain ranges could be considered an important geographical feature of Circumference Mountain, as the border of the Southern Blazing Heaven Territory that bordered the Royal Reed Sea. Yen Zhaoge had naturally spent some time studying this place. It was not just the martial practitioners of the South who were active here. This included the more famous geography of this place as well. Yen Zhaoge had long since known of the existence of the Dynasty River. It was just that this was his first time actually seeing it. Yen Zhaoge was naturally not unprepared for a battle, as he had been so confident as to rampage eastwards from the endless mountain range. Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope and the Southern Blazing Heaven Territory had stationed a large number of troops here at Circumference Mountain to guard against the experts of the southeast. Still, he had still come. Before arriving at Circumference Mountain, he had still been 70 or 80% confident. Now that he had personally come to Circumference Mountain and seen this majestic river, Yen Zhaoge was already more than 90% confident. Xia Guang appeared beside Yen Zhaoge now, sighing endlessly. When Yen Zhaoge had said that he would fight his way back, he had only felt excited. Still, when all this had really happened, other than excitement, Xia Guang felt more shock. Along the way, countless experts of the South had fallen before Yen Zhaoge. In the announcing Peace Mountain Range, the alliance of experts had met to deal with Yen Zhaoge. In the end, Yen Zhaoge had taken the initiative to attack Vast Spirit Mountain, virtually decimating it, as all the experts of the South had fled miserably. Of the 3 experts of the 8th level of the Martial Saint Realm, Yuan Xiancheng, Zhao Zhen, and Daoist East Spring, 2 had died, and 1 had been injured. Even Zhang Shuren of the late Immortal Bridge Martial Saint Realm was not a match for Yen Zhaoge, as he could only hurriedly return to Circumference Mountain, not daring to emerge from within the Grand Formation. A Seeing Divinity Martial Saint rampaging through the Southern Blazing Heaven Territory, beating the masses into submission. Such awe-inspiring might truly left Xia Guang yearning to prostrate himself in admiration. Vast Spirit Mountain's strength might be slightly inferior to 3-Foot Mountain, but the difference was not too far off. They were sects of the same level. There was more than just a single immortal bridge martial saint guarding over the clan, as well as a high-grade sacred artifact. However, whether it was the consecutive Drum Mountain Range, the Royal Reed Sea, or the Green Peak High Plains, such an existence who could be considered a hegemon had been single-handedly slain by Yen Zhaoge. Their higher echelon experts, Chief Daoist East Spring included, had virtually all perished, while the high-grade sacred artifact, the Dragontail Whip, had fallen into Yen Zhaoge's hands as well. The entire Vast Spirit Mountain was crushed beneath Yen Zhaoge's foot, no longer existing in this world thereafter. Just thinking of this, Xia Guang felt his blood surge, as he wished that he had such ability to immediately go and slaughter 3-Foot Mountain. Young Master, this formation before us just happens to block our path back to the southeastern Yang Heaven Territory. Who said at this time, although I don't know why the other southern experts have not chased us until now. It will be hard to say if we are blocked here for too long. Hearing his words, Xia Guang grew alert as well. While his understanding of the southern Blazing Heaven territory was limited, he knew that Zhang Shuren was not the only ninth-level martial saint here. There was definitely someone in pursuit, Yen Zhaoge answered nonchalantly. I also found it strange earlier, but I understood afterwards. Those people were probably chasing towards the north at the start to prevent me from leaving through the central June Heaven territory. At this point, Yen Zhaoge curled his lips. When I understand, I will naturally change my path, heading east once more. I fought my way here. Although I didn't waste too much time, I definitely can't compare to them. So, they shouldn't be far behind me. A worried look surfaced on Xia Guang's face. Young Master Yen, he recalled that Yen Zhaoge had once said that if he did not face more than one ninth-level martial saint at a time, even if someone tried to obstruct him, he would still have to fight his way back. Now, Yen Zhaoge had already proven that this was not empty boasting. Still, recalling the first half of his words now, Xia Guang could not help but feel rather worried. With Zhang Shuren blocking the way up ahead, the pursuers behind were most likely led by late Immortal Bridge martial saints. If they were caught in a pincer attack, the consequences, Yen Zhaoge casually pointed at that great river that traversed the north and south, smiling, it would be hard to say elsewhere, not even in the Royal Reed Sea. Still, I can properly stretch my muscles here at Circumference Mountain. Huh. Xia Guang was baffled. Hu's eyes swiveled before he gave a simple and honest laugh. Young master, do you have an idea now? This is a good place. Yen Zhaoge's figure flickered as he brought the two along with him in descending into the distance. While Zhang Shuren and Yuan Xianqing had decided not to leave the Wudong Phoenix perching formation, they were also paying attention to Yen Zhaoge's movements at all times. Seeing Yen Zhaoge first rise into the air before retreating and turning to leave now, not only did Zhang Shuren not relax, he instead became even more vigilant. The Wudong Phoenix perching formation obscured the sky, shifting space as it blocked the passageway between the two territories. This was naturally not something that Yen Zhaoge would be able to cross just by flying a little higher. Now that he had turned to the west, he was instead far away from the Grand Formation as he flew in the direction of the announcing Peace Mountain range that he had come from. Seeing this, Zhang Shuren could not help but wonder. This person is arrogant, but he is also said to be crafty. Still, if he just wants to lure us out of the formation, isn't he thinking too simply? Zhang Shuren felt that Yen Zhaoge was unable to break the Wudong Phoenix perching formation, while also being worried about being caught in a pincer attack by Zhang Shuren and Peng He, therefore retreating in the face of difficulties and fleeing elsewhere in the southern Blazing Heaven territory. Senior apprentice uncle, could he try to contact the martial practitioners of the southeast on the other side, intending to launch a pincer attack from both sides? Yuan Xianqing asked. Zhang Shuren nodded. This is the most likely possibility. This old man does not believe that he will let the matter rest just like that. This old man will watch over the core of the formation. Xianqing, you go check on the movements of the southeast. Whatever the case, as long as junior apprentice brother Peng and the others arrive, this person will not be able to escape. Yuan Xianqing acknowledged and left, Zhang Shuren observing patiently. As time passed, Zhang Shuren suddenly felt a change vaguely appear in the spiritual qi flow of Circumference Mountain beneath his feet. While this change did not seem great, it caused this ninth-level martial saint to feel a sense of fear and trepidation. The source of this change seemed to be the Dynasty River that flowed through Circumference Mountain. Zhang Shuren could not make sense of this at all. The Dynasty River was only a small part of Circumference Mountain, its source being far away in the central June Heaven territory. Even a dam would not be able to reach the Wudong Phoenix perching formation. Zhang Shuren could not think of what Yen Zhaoge could do with the Dynasty River. The greatest possibility was that he was actually luring him out of the formation before ambushing and killing him. Thinking of this, Zhang Shuren finally decided to deal with the myriad changes by remaining unchanging. It was as though he was being rewarded for his vigilance. The light of fire suddenly filled the sky where the announcing Peace Mountain Range and Circumference Mountain intersected. The fiery phoenix flapped its wings, a divine vessel traversing the sky as it descended upon Circumference Mountain. The blazing king, Peng He, and the others who had been traveling nonstop the entire way had finally caught up. Chapter 988. As one of the few bigwigs of Phoenix, Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope, alongside Zhang Shuren. Blazing King, Peng He felt extremely stifled at this moment. After chasing all the way north to the region of Thousand Lakes, he discovered that Yan Zhaoga had actually not intended to pass through the central Junheaven territory, as he had instead headed straight east. Peng He, who seemed to have punched thin air, felt like he had been fooled somewhat. Still, as he pursued all the way east without stopping, everything he saw along the way was truly shocking. Along the way from the endless mountain range, there were many powers which were renowned experts of the southern blazing heaven territory. Still, none of them were able to obstruct Yan Zhaoga's footsteps without exception. That youth from the southeast resembled a massive prehistoric beast as he rampaged through the lands of the southern blazing heaven territory. When Peng He arrived near the border between the broad Dong Mound Plains and the announcing Peace Mountain Range, he was rendered wide-eyed and tongue-tied by the news transmitted from there. Heroes of the announcing Peace Mountain Range had congregated. Few aside, all the peak experts of the entire announcing Peace Mountain Range were present. Even the experts of other regions surrounding the announcing Peace Mountain Range had hurried over. They had all gathered here with the intention of hunting down and capturing Yan Zhaoga, who knew that Yan Zhaoga would actually take the initiative to attack Vast Spirit Mountain. In the end, this alliance meet had become a complete joke. Vast Spirit Mountain, who was the local ruler, had virtually been decimated. The most outstanding disciple of Phoenix, Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope, Phoenix pupils Yuan Xiancheng had been beaten to the point of undergoing nirvanic rebirth twice in a row. Even Elder Zhang Shuren, who guarded over the entire eastern region of the southern blazing heaven territory, had been defeated as he could only flee east in a sorry state. Hearing this news, all the Wudong Slope martial practitioners were rendered dazed on the spot. Who was Zhang Shuren? A longtime elder of Wudong Slope, a late immortal bridge martial saint. Peng He's own cultivation base was merely on par with Zhang Shuren's. Yet Zhang Shuren had actually been beaten to the point of fleeing by Yan Zhaoga being pursued all the way. Moreover, Yuan Xiancheng, Zhao Zhen, Taoist East Spring, and the other experts had also been with Zhang Shuren. Immortal artifact. This was the first thought that flashed through Peng He's mind at the time. Still, after they had traversed the announcing Peace Mountain Range, Peng He included, all of them fell silent once more, including Peng He. Every Wudong Slope martial practitioner had complicated feelings due to the matter of Zhuang Chaohui, and the other martial practitioners who had headed to the Taoist temple. Peng He and the others actually no longer dared to underestimate Yan Zhaoga. But now they realized that the truth seemed to be different from what they had expected. Even Qing Shuzi and Taoist Leading Mist, who had come in excitement, exchanged glances. They could see the surprise in each other's eyes. While they did not like Yan Zhaoga, they also had a general estimate of his strength. After all, in the great battle at Broad Creed Mountain in the Royal Reed Sea that year, Shan Lingzi, King Xuanqing, and even Taoist Shi had all been slain. Moreover, Guan Lide, the star-plucking hermit, was also in the picture. However, Yan Zhaoga's might still surpassed their expectations, especially since there was no trace of a celestial weapon from the beginning to the end. even excluding the factor of high-grade sacred artifacts like the extreme Yang seal for a late-seeing divinity martial saint to possess such a cultivation base. The green-robed Qing Shuzi had a rare, solemn expression on his face. As the head disciple of the Heaven Primordial Emperor, he was a heaven-defying genius who possessed great fortuitous encounters, and his strength was above Peng He and Zhang Shuren. Still, he was still a late immortal bridge martial saint, like Zhang Shuren at the end of the day. It was completely impossible for him to challenge Zhang Shuren as a sixth-level martial saint at all. At the end of the day, having been able to attain the late immortal bridge stage beneath the human exalt stage, Zhang Shuren was also a genius amongst geniuses of his generation. Back when he had been a merging avatar martial saint or even a seeing divinity martial saint, he had been able to take on many opponents of the same cultivation level alone. Qing Shuzi was younger and more powerful than Zhang Shuren. Still, he felt that even if he had a few high-grade sacred artifacts, he would still not be able to defeat Zhang Shuren of the 9th level of the martial saint realm at the 6th level of the martial saint realm. What he valued more was the potential that Yan Zhaoge had displayed. He did not fear clashing with him now. Taoist leading Mist's expression turned more solemn as he said nothing. They dared not tarry as they sped off, continuing east as they rushed to Circumference Mountain. While Zhang Shuren had the geographical advantage at Circumference Mountain, Peng He and the others still felt rather uncertain at this moment. Circumference Mountain was where the two territories intersected. Besides the problem of Yan Zhaoge, there was also the threat of experts of the southeast on the other side. Only when they arrived at the border and saw that Wudong forest, which obscured the heavens and concealed the sun, did they finally heave a sigh of relief. Seeing Zhang Shuren and Yuan Xiancheng, they could finally grasp all the details of the battle at Vast Spirit Mountain. As they arrived, the hearts of Zhang Shuren and Yuan Xiancheng, who had always been on tenterhooks, finally calmed down. Whatever the case, Yan Zhaoge would not be able to stir up any major waves this time. I have let you two fellow Taoists of illusory Coming Peak witness this. Zhang Shuren sighed. It is not that this old man is unable to conceal his own mistakes. Still, that Yan Zhaoge is indeed extraordinary. Kunlun Mountain's illusory Coming Peak was where the Heaven Emperor's Tao arena and cave manor was located. Hearing his words, Qing Shuzi and Taoist leading Miss both said, "There is no need to say this, Mr. Zhang. We also know that Yan Zhaoge is extraordinary." Zhang Shuren said, while this old man too would like nothing more than to crush his bones and scatter his ashes. This junior from a lower world can still be hailed as a young heaven's favored son, even in the world beyond worlds, a descending immortal. If he does not die, he will definitely become a legend in the future. Pausing for a moment, Zhang Shuren said, "Actually, he can already be said to be a legend now. Let us personally bury a legend this time." Then, Peng He said coldly, "If it were anyone else, this old man would also praise them for being formidable. Still, the more outstanding this Yan Zhaoge is, the more he deserves to die. He definitely cannot be allowed to leave the south alive." Zhang Shuren did not say this in front of Qing Shuzi and Taoist leading Mist, as he instead informed them via sound transmission. Now, Peng He already knew that the guess that he had been most worried about earlier had come true. Zhuang Chaohui and the others had precisely died at Yan Zhaoge's hands. Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope, and Yan Zhaoge no longer had any room for negotiation. First, not speaking of what the Southern Exalt Zhuangshan thought. As Zhuang Chaohui's father-in-law, Peng He, who had seen his daughter become a widow, would definitely not let the matter rest just like that. "Since we have come here, we will not just stand by and watch," Qing Shuzi said mildly. "If you of Wudong Slope do not feel that we brothers are being presumptuous in making a move, Exchanging glances, Peng He and Zhang Shuren shook their heads in unison. Of course, we are greatly grateful that you are willing to make a move, fellow Taoists. However much they hated Yin Zhaoge, Peng He and Zhang Shuren had to admit that Yin Zhaoge was extraordinary. With just the two of them alone, they would only be able to stably defend Circumference Mountain at most, blocking Yin Zhaoge's path back to the southeast. If they wanted to capture and kill Yin Zhaoge, their strength would still be a little lacking unless Yin Zhaoge wholeheartedly clashed against the Wudong Phoenix perching formation, fighting to the death without retreating. Even so, many people would probably have to accompany Yin Zhaoge in death. If Qing Shuzi was willing to make a move, the situation would be completely different. There were a total of 3 ninth-level martial saints, one of whom was a peak existence beneath the human exalt realm in the entire world beyond worlds. Now, we have to ponder over where exactly that Yin Zhaoge has gone. This old man agrees with senior apprentice brother Zhang's point of view. This person is arrogant and will not retreat so easily, Peng He said. Zhang Shuren knit his brows. There is a situation regarding the Dynasty River that flows through this place. At this point, Zhang Shuren's expression suddenly changed abruptly as he gazed into the distance. There, the dim yellow light of water suddenly suffused the horizon. Chapter 9, 89. Peng He, Qing Shuzi, and the others also had a rather limited understanding of the geography of the area around Fanyuan Mountain. They had mostly heard about it. Zhang Shuren, on the other hand, was different. He had been guarding this place and had even set up the Wudong Phoenix perching formation. Zhang Shuren naturally had a good understanding of the flow of spiritual qi in the earth veins in the area. There seemed to be a change in the flow of spiritual qi in the area of Dynasty River earlier, which caught his attention. However, the changes at that time were relatively minor. Although Zhang Shuren could not see through it, the changes did not have much effect on the area around Mount Fangyuan. But at this moment, he could clearly feel that a huge change was happening in the distant Dynasty River's spiritual qi network. Affected by this, the spirit qi flow of the entire Circumference Mountain changed drastically as well. At this moment, the Wudong Phoenix perching array that he had set up was even faintly shaken. No one broke the formation, but they were shaken. This kind of situation was simply unimaginable most of the time. Zhang Shuren fixed his eyes on the direction of the Chao River, only to see the dark yellow water rising. And for a moment, the turbid waves surged to the sky. The water of the Dynasty River has always been clear and bright. Why is it so turbid? Zhang Shuren felt even more uneasy. Qing Shuzi, Peng He, Taoist leading mist, Yuan Xianqing, and the others all looked in the direction of that great river. The Dynasty River was not a river of Circumference Mountain. Instead, it was a massive water vein that traversed the central June Heaven territory and the southern Blazing Heaven territory. It was wide as an ocean, resembling a heavenly river as it was renowned throughout the entire world beyond worlds. At this moment, when they saw the torrential turbid waves, everyone immediately felt that something was wrong. While that Yin Zhaoge possesses outstanding strength, he should still be unable to cause changes to the Dynasty River, right? Peng, he was rather hesitant. Zhang Shuren said, I'm not sure of the reason either, but it's most likely his doing. Not long after he left, I sensed that there was something wrong with the spiritual qi movement in the Dynasty River. It was just that it was too faint at the time. In order to secure the borders of Circumference Mountain and prevent the people from the southeast from arriving, I ignored it. But from the looks of it, it's really unusual. Hearing this, Peng He did not ask more questions and said directly, Senior Brother Zhang, please continue to guard here, and I will go to check it out with the 2 Taoism fellows of illusory coming peak. However, before he could make a move, The dark, yellow, watery light in the distance had already rushed towards them. The spirit chi fluctuations of Circumference Mountain were also getting increasingly chaotic, and the signs of instability were intensifying rapidly. However, as he spoke, the momentum of the water increased, and it was already in front of everyone. Zhang Shuren's expression changed. Even if he built a dam to store water, how would he be able to block such a vast river? Even if it succeeds, there won't be enough time for the water to reach here. The speed at which the spiritual chi is changing is getting faster and faster. This is definitely not caused by Yan Zhaoge's personal strength. Instead, it seems more like the activation of a formation. He didn't dare to hesitate. He first activated the Wutong Phoenix perching formation, and layers of flames lit up to resist the boundless and monstrous flood. However, due to the terrain, the Wutong Phoenix perching formation was already unstable. Now that it was washed away by the flood, it was on the verge of collapse. At this moment, the sea of fire was like a candle flickering in the wind. Peng He and the others also hurried to help Zhang Shuren stabilize the formation. But as soon as they came into contact with it, everyone felt their minds go into a trance. The situation of the 9th level of the Martial Saint realm was still slightly better. The others felt dizzy in an instant. Even Taoist leading Mist and Yuan Xianqing, who were at the 8th level of the Martial Saint realm, shook slightly. Not good. Could it be? Qing Shizi's gaze suddenly narrowed. He tried his best to ascend, only to see that above the rapidly approaching dark yellow river, there were gusts of chilly wind. As the chilly wind howled, black fog quickly suffused the area. A moment earlier, the sun had still been shining high up in the sky. Now, however, it was obscured by the black fog as the light of the sky could not be seen. It was fine if it was just the dark yellow river water, enveloped by that black fog and blown by the chilly wind. Even with Qing Shizi's cultivation base, he felt dizzy as though he was drunk. He hurriedly calmed his mind, expanding his sleeve as he sucked in a greater part of the black fog of the chilly wind that surrounded him. However, the chilly wind and black fog that suffused the dark yellow river obscured the heavens and concealed the sun with no end in sight as it immediately swept over once more. Qing Shizi flicked his sleeve, shifting through space as he rapidly descended. Down below, that dark yellow river that resembled a natural disaster had virtually already devoured the entire Wudong forest. The riding wind heavenly vessel truly played the role of a vessel at this moment as it bobbed on the surface of the great river. Peng, he was currently trying his best to stabilize the vessel as Zhang Shuren and the others had already boarded it. Looking at the Wutong Phoenix perching formation down below that had been submerged, Zhang Shuren felt like crying, yet no tears would come. Now, Yan Zhaoge's voice simultaneously resounded between the heavens and the earth, amidst the black fog of the dark yellow river wind all around them. Zhang Baowu, your Wudong Phoenix perching formation is indeed extraordinary. Yan Zhaoge smiled. Courtesy demands reciprocation. You should try this Yan's formation as well. Qing Shizi landed back on the riding wind heavenly vessel, forcibly resisting the surrounding chilly wind and black fog. He knit his brows tightly. How does this person know this ancient, ferocious formation? Where did he obtain this legacy from? At this moment, other than Qing Shizi, Zhang Shuren, Peng He, Taoist leading Mist, and Yuan Xianqing, who were still able to stand, the other martial practitioners of the south had all collapsed onto the deck of the riding wind heavenly vessel. Everyone was in a daze, as most of them were unconscious. Even those few who could still maintain their consciousness had collapsed onto the ground, drowsy as well. Ancient, ferocious formation. Zhang Shuren barely managed to hold on as he looked at his fellow disciples who had all fainted before him. Then at that dark yellow river that meandered 9 times, nether winds blowing endlessly above it as black fog obscured the heavens. 9 Bends Yellow River Formation. When the nearby Taoist leading mist heard Qing Shizi's words, he seemed to have thought of something as well and spoke in unison with Zhang Shuren. He couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. Peng He and Yuan Xiancheng reacted at the same time and turned pale with fright. The 9 Bends Yellow River Formation originated from the prime Clear Sex ancestor, the Lord of Numinous Treasure's direct lineage, the 3 immortal islands Cloud Sky, Jade Sky, and Jade Sky. According to ancient legends, in the investiture of the gods' era, it had shone brilliantly. It was unknown how many legends and immortals had fallen to this formation. After the 3 sky goddesses were conferred as gods and entered the heavenly court, the yellow river of the 9 Bends Formation was also spread to the heavenly court's divine palace. There was a complete formation diagram in the library for Yan Zhaoge. To circulate the entire dynasty river in order to establish a formation was still impossible. However, he could change the flow of the dynasty river within Circumference Mountain, causing the legendary 9 Bends of the Yellow River to reappear in the world. Its might was naturally far inferior to the grand formation set up by the 3 sky goddesses of the era of the gods. It lacked the immortal bewitching pill, the secluded immortal mantra, and other cores, so it could only be considered as having the form of the formation. There was also no legendary treasure, the primordial chaos golden chalice. Still, the person he was going to deal with now was also far from being a bigwig of those legends. Qing Shizi and Zhang Shuren exchanged glances, smiling bitterly at the same time. Dynasty River, Dynasty River, Dynasty River. Zhang Shuren sighed towards the heavens. Circumference Mountain was not his, Zhang Shuren's, geographical advantage. It was not his, Zhang Shuren's, home ground. Yan Zhaoge was currently seated in the meditative position above the 9 Bends of the Yellow River, calmly looking at the surging waves and dissipating clouds before him. Of course, I know that your Wudong Slope has stationed a large number of troops here at the border of Circumference Mountain. Still, it is fine if I cannot reach Circumference Mountain. Still, from the moment I set foot on Circumference Mountain, this has already been my territory. Chapter 990. The legendary Yellow River of 9 Bends Formation contained the wonders of heaven and earth. Among them were the immortal bewitching pill, the secluded immortal mantra, the ability to lose an immortal's spirit, vanish an immortal's soul, trap an immortal's form, damage an immortal's aura, lose an immortal's original form, and damage an immortal's body. Among the 9 tunes, there was no straight one. The tunes contained the wonders of creation and the secrets of immortals. Qing Shizi, Zhang Shuren, and the others were all rather knowledgeable. Having already personally experienced the might of this 9 Bends Yellow River Formation now, they clearly knew that this grand formation before them was not a bluff at all. Compared to the legendary, immortals will become mortals when they enter this place, and mortals will perish when they enter this place. It could be said that it was just a facade. However, none of them had pushed open the immortal door. Now that he was trapped in the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, he was in a perilous situation. Being blown by the cold wind and black mist, his soul was corroded, and he couldn't help but feel dizzy. The acupoints on his body that were like real stars started to feel blocked. The first step for a martial saint to ascend the immortal bridge from seeing divinity was to allow the acupoints that had already seen true divinity to circulate like the stars in the sky, having their own trajectories and circulations. The 7th level of the martial saint realm was the early immortal bridge stage. If one wanted to advance to the 8th level of the martial saint realm, the mid-immortal bridge stage, the acupoints within one's body would be extinguished like stars, perishing naturally. Just like how humans had a lifespan, stars also had a lifespan. It was just that it was extremely long, but stars would also die. When a martial artist cultivated their internal universe and resonated with the external universe, they also had to take this step. The self-destruction of acupoints during the cultivation process would not cause a martial artist's strength to regress. The quantity might be small, but the quality had reached a whole new level. Life and death are the eternal themes of the world, from birth to destruction, and then to the creation of a new life. This cycle repeated over and over again, conforming to the heavenly Tao. The hallmark of ascending from the 8th level of the martial saint realm to the 9th level of the martial saint realm was when a martial practitioner had refined and formed brand new acupoints that resembled new stars within their bodies. With that, the martial practitioner's cultivation base would rise yet another level as he stepped into the 9th level of the martial saint realm, the late immortal bridge stage. The cycle of life and death never ended. Moreover, the laws of self-operation were constantly perfected and stabilized. A martial artist's inner universe also approached the true universe. During this process, a martial artist's comprehension of the principles of heaven and earth, as well as their grasp of their own body's condition, would become clearer and deeper. Eventually, all of the acupoints in one's body would be refined into divinity, like stars. The internal universe would completely resonate with the real universe, and then one would have the chance to become a human, immortal, a paragon. However, it was very difficult to achieve this. Most martial artists would never be able to achieve this in their entire lives. However, the people present were not completely hopeless. This was especially so for Qing Shuzi and Yuan Xiancheng. Their hopes were even greater. But now they could clearly sense that the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation was affecting them and that their insides were becoming unstable. Sinister winds blew, and beneath the assault of the black fog, the 3 9th-level martial saints, Qing Shuzi, Pang He, and Zhang Shuren, all vaguely felt like they were unable to regenerate their acupoints. The extinguished acupoints were no longer reborn, as though their cultivation bases had fallen back to the 8th level of the martial saint realm. Yuan Xiancheng and Taoist, leading mist of the 8th level of the martial saint realm, felt that while the acupoints of their true divinities were still circulating, they had become sluggish and rigid. The acupoints were unable to be born and extinguished like actual stars as they lost a portion of their characteristics, as though their cultivation bases had fallen back to the 7th level of the martial saint realm. What shocked them even more was the fact that things did not end here. As time passed, all of this seemed to be gradually intensifying. It is just that our cultivation bases have been temporarily suppressed by the sinister winds and black fog now. Zhang Shuren said in a heavy tone, "If we fall unconscious, our foundations will really be harmed and our cultivation bases will fall, our entire lifetime's worth of cultivation gone down the drain." Qing Shuzi snorted coldly. "If we remain here for too long, the outcome will be the same. We have to leave quickly." Amidst his words, he waved his sleeve, shifting space as he dispelled the sinister winds and black fog before him. Still, within the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, time and space were both affected by the formation. Everything was distorted in the first place. Even though Qing Shuzi was powerful, he would still be hard-pressed to charge out of it. Peng He and the others dared not hesitate in the slightest as they hurriedly displayed their strengths. The riding wind, heavenly vessel howled, breaking through the waves as it sought to break free of the encirclement of the dark yellow river. Yet beneath the numerous tsunami-like waves, it was still battered left and right as it was only barely able to prevent the vessel from capsizing. Gazing over, it was still a dense mass of darkness, as the sun could not be seen as it was impossible to distinguish north from south. While their hearts burned with anxiety, Yan Zhaoga's formation had already been completed. Borrowing the power of the Dynasty River, the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation enveloped the entire domain of Circumference Mountain. From the outside world, the entire Circumference Mountain seemed to have been drowned within the dark yellow river. Looking down from above, one could see the winding nine bends of the dark yellow river as it was filled with the profundities of creation. Yet the surface of the river was enveloped by gloomy winds and tragic fog, its baleful chi pressing down on one's heart as it left one panic-stricken. The space within the Grand Formation was even vaster as it changed unceasingly. No matter how Peng He and the others rushed about, they were simply unable to charge out of it. We are not proficient in the variations of the formation. If we continue like this, it would be futile. There is already not much time left. Qing Shuzi did not lose his calm. As time passed, he too felt dizzy from being blown about by the sinister winds and black fog as he could only try his best to concentrate. This Nine Bends Yellow River Formation is a technique of the legendary immortal bigwigs. It is definitely not something that an ordinary person can set up. That fella surnamed Yen possesses outstanding strength and is highly proficient in formations. However, the gap in their cultivation bases is still there at the end of the day. In order to wield this peerless, fearsome formation, he would have to be fully focused and go all out. He would definitely not be able to fight against anyone now. Hearing Qing Shuzi's words, Peng He and the others already understood. Going around in circles within the formation like this would fall right into that fella's trap. Peng He said anxiously, "We have to do the exact opposite, attacking where it must be saved in order to break the formation." Zhang Shuren had currently transformed into a wudong tree and was rooted within the ship, resisting the onslaught of the sinister winds and black fog. Now, he said, since it's a formation, there will definitely be a formation core. That fella surnamed Yen is definitely there now. We will charge through the most dangerous part of his formation. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Peng He handed control of the riding wind heavenly vessel over to Zhang Shuren. Relying on his attainments in formations, Zhang Shuren forcibly analyzed the variations of the Grand Formation as he led everyone in charging through the most dangerous part of the formation. Go! Everyone painstakingly endured the effects of the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation as they advanced. Peng He's hands were like sabers as they chopped forward in unison. A fiery phoenix of extraordinary luster shot out. It was dim blue in color and tyrannical to the extreme as it led the way. Qing Shuzi executed illusory Coming Peaks direct lineage heaven essence flying sleeve supreme martial arts. At this moment, softness transformed into toughness as his sleeve swept outwards, resembling sabers and swords as it hacked through space. Taoist leading mist and Yuan Xianqing sat in the meditative position on the deck of the riding wind heavenly vessel, stabilizing their minds. As time passed, the two experts of the 8th level of the Martial Saint realm, who had been rampaging through the outside world, were already almost unable to hold on any longer as they could only remain silent like quails. The two could not even be bothered about feeling despondent at this moment, as they were instead filled with worry. If this continued, they would ultimately follow in the footsteps of the others. Even Qing Shuzi, Peng He and Zhang Shuren, these three experts of the 9th level of the Martial Saint realm, were facing greater and greater pressure. Chapter 991. Unceasingly whittled down by the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, Qing Shuzi's trio began to feel dizzy as well. They even vaguely felt that their cultivation bases were falling further. While they persisted solely through sheer willpower, they were already nearing their limits. Now, the annoying black fog of nether wind before them suddenly grew faint. They were overjoyed as they hurriedly continued charging forward, finally shooting past the dense fog before them in a single stroke. The scene that appeared before their eyes now was that of a white-clothed youth wearing a black-bordered blue robe seated on the surface of that great dark yellow river. It was precisely Yen Zhaoge. Not only was Yen Zhaoge not flustered, he instead appeared rather interested as his figure bobbed along with the river water in a natural yet relaxed manner. His gaze fell on Qing Shuzi, appraising his robe and his appearance before he smiled. The head disciple of the Heaven Emperor's lineage, Taoist Qing Shuzi, I can tell that you seem to possess the true legacy of the Heaven Emperor. As he said thus, Yen Zhaoge stood up, instead walking towards Wudong slopes riding Wind Heavenly Vessel. This Yen would like to witness the true legacy of the Heaven Emperor. Please enlighten me, Taoist. Hearing his words, the expressions of Zhang Shuren, Peng He, and Qing Shuzi all changed. Yen Zhaoge's words clearly meant that they had been able to make it here, not because of their abilities, but because Yen Zhaoge wanted to witness the legacy of the Heaven Emperor. Therefore, he had intentionally let them in. You can only come in if I let you in. Arrogant brat, going too far. Peng, he was greatly enraged as he raised a saber, chopping towards Yen Zhaoge first. Seeing this, Yen Zhaoge did not mind, as he just smiled. While you appear rash on the surface, you are actually slippery and scheming within. While Peng He and the other two late immortal bridge experts were all here now, their cultivation bases had all been whittled down by this sinister nine-bends Yellow River formation, as they had long since been unable to regain their peak states. However confident Peng He was in having Qing Shuzi fight Yen Zhaoge one-on-one now, he still felt that he would not be able to do so. Yuan Xiancheng and the others were all waiting there. Whether they won or lost as time dragged on, it would be hard for them to save Yen Zhaoge. Peng He could no longer be bothered about whether Qing Shuzi wanted face now, as he only wished to attack together and end the battle as quickly as possible, besieging and finishing off Yen Zhaoge. In making a move first, he was actually inviting Qing Shuzi and Zhang Shuren to attack together. Quick! As Peng He shouted, he didn't hold back at all and used his full strength in the first move. A long saber appeared in his hand, the blade of the saber overflowing with blue light. The blazing dim blue blazing fire now transformed into a blue fiery phoenix, spreading its wings as it flew towards Yen Zhaoge. As the fire phoenix approached, its body suddenly split apart. Red and blue saber lights intertwined, splitting heaven and earth. Half of the reason why Peng He was given the title of Blazing King was because of this top-grade holy artifact saber in his hands. Using the dark brilliance black flame rock as the main material, fusing many different types of spirit flames and treasures, this black flame saber was finally forged. The treasured saber could emit the dark blue flames of the netherworld brilliant black flame, and its power was even greater than all kinds of spiritual flames. Peng He had racked his brains to collect saber techniques from all over the world, incorporating what he had learned from Wudong Slope, and finally created a set of King Blazing Saber. It was different from Zhang Shuren's self-created Divine Wudong Palm, which combined both offense and defense. When fully focused on defense, it was even more extraordinary. It could be said to be the #1 defensive secret art of Wudong Slope. Peng He's King Blazing Saber was clearly heavy on offense and light on defense. Amongst the martial arts of Wudong Slope, which had always been stronger in defense, it had a completely new look to it. Ever since his youth, Peng He himself had been rather unique amongst the martial practitioners of Wudong Slope. While he cultivated in the true intent of the four virtues, he cultivated in the Phoenix true form scripture, focusing more on the descent of a fiery phoenix, blazing flames incinerating the heavens. Now, he held nothing back as he attacked with all his might. The black flame saber and the blazing king saber complemented each other, increasing their power. There is something that you have forgotten. Let me remind you of. Yen Zhaoge instead smiled very casually. Within this formation of mine, You have long since ceased to be a 9th-level martial saint. Now, a dark green bamboo cane appeared in Yan Zhaoga's hand, striking towards Peng He's black flame saber. Substituting sword with cane, a slaying azure dragon, a mournful sword glow slaying dragons and slaying phoenixes. Now, however, a pair of palms reached over from the side. As the palms moved, they seemed to be sealed at the same time as they blocked Yan Zhaoga's sword for Peng He. It was none other than Wudong Slope's other 9th-level martial saint bigwig, Zhang Shuren. He cooperated with Peng He, one attacking and the other defending as they were extremely well coordinated. Yan Zhaoga was unconcerned as he retracted his sword and switched to a palm, exchanging blows with Zhang Shuren as he spun, his sword still pointing towards Peng He. Already knowing the uniqueness of Yan Zhaoga's dark green bamboo cane, Peng He could only change his stance upon seeing this. Don't stand on ceremony, Taoist. Clashing within my grand formation is not a fair competition in the first place. Yan Zhaoga called out to Qing Shuzi even as he clashed with Peng He and Zhang Shuren. Peng He and the others were extremely shocked as they looked at Yan Zhaoga. It was indeed not easy for Yan Zhaoga to control this 9 bends Yellow River formation now. Still, it was completely different from what his opponents had guessed earlier. As Yan Zhaoga clashed with Peng He and the others at this moment, the 9 bends Yellow River formation was still circulating unceasingly. While those gusts of chilly wind and dense black fog were not as fierce as before, they still corroded the bones and wounded the soul, bewitching one's mind as their acupoints were clogged and their souls sluggish. Meanwhile, Yan Zhaoga was completely unrestrained in his attacks as he moved with ease. Peng He and Zhang Shuren had both had their cultivation bases suppressed and whittled down by the 9 bends Yellow River formation. Now that they had joined forces, they were still being pushed back repeatedly by Yan Zhaoga. Seeing this from the side, Qing Shuzi knit his brows tightly, looking at his junior apprentice brother Taoist, leading Mist, who was seated in the meditative position atop the riding wind heavenly vessel. He finally shook his head and flew up as well. He flicked his sleeve, striking straight towards Yan Zhaoga with a momentum that actually seemed even stronger than that of Peng He's blazing king saber. Good move. As Yan Zhaoga's cane struck down on Peng He's blazing flame saber, sparks instantly splattering everywhere as its dim blue color dimmed. Then, with the yin-yang finger, Peng He's saber was directed towards Zhang Shuren's Wudong divine palm. After sending a pair of senior apprentice brothers of Phoenix Ritual Mountain off to spar, Yan Zhaoga did not cease as he sent a palm towards Qing Shuzi. This palm of his simultaneously contained the profundities of the cyclic heavenly seal and the Taiji yin-yang palm. Whether this primordial heaven-flying sleeve of Qing Shuzi was tough or soft, Yan Zhaoga would forcibly receive it head-on. Qing Shuzi's sleeve resembled the edge of a saber as it hacked down on Yan Zhaoga's palm. Yan Zhaoga circulated the power of the 5 elements deific immortal body, his body resembling Vajra as he caught the saber barehanded, forcibly grabbing at Qing Shuzi's sleeve. Withdraw. Qing Shuzi's gaze flickered as he suddenly changed his stance. Inside his sleeve, time and space suddenly became blurry, and a myriad of colors and scenes appeared. At this moment, Qing Shuzi seemed to have opened a spatial passageway within his sleeve that led to the chaotic flows of space outside of the world beyond worlds. Space distorted as it rotated, forming an immense suction force that sought to devour Yan Zhaoga entirely within. Heaven-earth within sleeve. It was precisely the direct lineage martial art of the primordial suppressing immortal who had lived alongside the world that year. Heaven and earth rotated within the sleeve, with each layer being yet another heavenly layer. Let alone those whose cultivation bases were lower than his, even opponents who were on par with him would be able to reign in this move if they were not careful. As soon as Qing Shuzi executed this move, Even the expressions of Peng, He, and Zhang Shuren changed. Why was there a primordial heaven flying sleeve? That was actually a weakened and derivative version of the heaven-earth within sleeve. This was because the heaven-earth within sleeve was just too difficult to cultivate in. It was rumored that even the Heaven Emperor had only managed to successfully cultivate it in the human immortal realm that year. As his companions, Peng He and Zhang Shuren had never thought that Qing Shuzi would actually know this move. Chapter 992. Qing Shuzi had been renowned for a long time as he was publicly acclaimed as one of the few experts of the 9th level of the martial saint realm of the world beyond worlds who were most likely to attain the human exalt stage. His strength had long since been widely acknowledged as a heaven-defying genius who stood at the forefront of his peers. While martial practitioners were never convinced by others, be it Peng He or Zhang Shuren, they both admitted that Qing Shuzi's chances of victory were greater if they were enemies. Still, if they really fought victory or defeat, they would have to experience a major battle at the very least in order to see who was superior. Zhang Shuren and Peng He of Phoenix, Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope, who were both late immortal bridge martial saints, were confident in this. Yet, never would they have thought that Qing Shuzi would actually have successfully cultivated in the supreme martial art of the lineage of the primordial suppressing immortal's five-manner locale, the heaven-earth within sleeve, before having attained the human exalt realm. This meant that if they were to face Qing Shuzi unknowingly, they might very well be taken in by the heaven-earth within sleeve in a single move. Granted, having been taken in by the heaven-earth within sleeve did not mean that Qing Shuzi could casually capture or kill them. It was not like he was capturing them alive, instead temporarily sealing them. While the chances of those who had been taken in by the heaven-earth within sleeve were rather low, it was not as if they could not escape at all. It was just that even if they could, they would really have lost all face. Moreover, with Qing Shuzi having successfully taken them in by the heaven-earth within sleeve, he had indisputably gained a great advantage, as he had countless methods to expand his battle results and completely defeat his opponents. What shocked Zhang Shuren and Peng He was that Qing Shuzi, who had already been renowned throughout the world beyond worlds, and whom everyone looked up to, had actually still held back, having yet to display his full flair. He had already suppressed countless other geniuses, being a genius amongst geniuses, who knew that this was actually still not his limit. If not for Yan Zhaoga's 9 bends Yellow River Formation today, no one would probably know how great this head disciple of the Heaven Emperor truly was. Even Yan Zhaoga was taken aback by Qing Shuzi's actions as his eyes lit up. This was a true immortal technique, a peak martial art that was renowned even in the entire history of Taoism. Qing Shuzi had only just grasped the basics of it after successfully cultivating it. It was more than enough for him to run amok in the martial saint realm. It would be hard for him to meet a worthy opponent in the same realm. Good. Yan Zhaoga cheered. His hand, which had previously grabbed at Qing Shuzi's sleeve, was now about to be sucked into the space-time turbulence. Caught off guard, Yan Zhaoga momentarily lost the initiative. He took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with chaos. As the acupoints in his body opened and closed, one mass of chaotic energy after another appeared indistinctly. At this moment, the acupoints within Yan Zhaoga's body no longer resembled numerous stars, instead resembling clumps of chaos. Before the starry sky of the universe appeared, before the world was created, there was no left, no right, no front, no back, no up, no down. Surrounding Yan Zhaoga's outstretched palm, 12 wheels of light simultaneously appeared, floating and sinking as they rotated unceasingly. As the wheel of light rose and fell, light and darkness gradually merged. It was not bright, but it was not dark either. The world was blurry and hazy, possessing the peerless heavenly scripture on the inside, and the dim radiant 12 arts on the outside. Yen Zhaoge's fist force revealed some signs of chaos amidst the interlacing of light and darkness. Space was locked down by Yen Zhaoge at this moment. His body, which had originally already been shaken and was about to be sucked into Qing Shizi's sleeve, stabilized itself once more. The bit of initiative that Qing Shizi had seized by relying on the universe within the sleeve to launch a surprise attack was lost just like that. As soon as Yen Zhaoge released it, the mass of qi that resembled chaos within his body vanished. On his palm, a water-like radiance circulated. Everywhere it passed, the scenery of the world turned pale. The next moment, the water currents flowed in reverse. Making use of this chance, Yen Zhaoge extricated his hand that had been bound by Qing Shizi's sleeve. Zhang Shuren, Pang He, and Qing Shizi felt as if time was being reversed before their eyes. Dim, radiant 12 arts, Aeon light heavenly scripture. The three of them simultaneously felt a chill in their hearts. He can actually avoid the heaven-earth within sleeve like this. Zhang Shuren and Pang He rushed forward, not letting Qing Shizi face Yen Zhaoge alone. As time passed, the erosion of the Yellow River of 9 Bends formation became more and more severe. If they could not end the battle quickly, even without Yen Zhaoge making a move, they would all feel ashamed of themselves. However, Yen Zhaoge now let out a long breath, retracting his palm, abruptly flipping it over. The cyclic heavenly seal reappeared. This time, Yen Zhaoge focused on intent rather than power. With a single palm strike, the situation was reversed, and Qing Shizi was directly forced into retreat. At the same time, the extreme yang seal reappeared above Yen Zhaoge's head, mightily slamming down towards Zhang Shuren and Pang He. Zhang Shuren raised his palms, resisting with all his might. Yet he was directly knocked down from midair by the extreme yang seal, smashing into the surging waters of the Yellow River down below. Then Yen Zhaoge's dark green bamboo cane mightily descended, sending the blazing flame saber directly flying out of Pang He's hands. As he struck out with a palm, Pang He barely managed to resist it. Yet Yen Zhaoge immediately kicked out again, instantly sending this long-time elder of Wudong Slope flying backwards. Qing Shizi attacked once more. Still, Yen Zhaoge was prepared this time. His figure spun, his speed swift as he instantly arrived before Qing Shizi. He bent his elbow before striking towards Qing Shizi's heart. Qing Shizi could only helplessly retreat. Still, this head disciple of the Heaven Emperor was not someone easy to deal with at the end of the day, as his eyes suddenly lit up. The next moment, Qing Shizi's gaze directly transformed into 2 yellow earthen sword lights, piercing towards Yen Zhaoge's eyes just inches away. Illusory Coming Peak's direct lineage, primordial earth golden eyes sword. The Heaven Emperor was proficient in the variations of space and time, his disciples all possessing outstanding movement techniques, as they were renowned throughout the entire world beyond worlds. As soon as Yen Zhaoge got close, he wouldn't give his opponent a chance to pull apart the distance between them once more. Faced with Qing Shizi's golden eyes of earth sword, he did not dodge or evade. Purple lightning flashed in his eyes. Similarly, a bolt of an instant's divine thunder blasted straight at Qing Shizi. The lightning and the sword light intersected in midair, and the violent lightning instantly shattered the earthy yellow sword light. Having gained the upper hand, Yen Zhaoge simultaneously grabbed Qing Shizi's arm with both hands. He grabbed his wrist with one hand and his shoulder with the other. Qing Shizi's expression changed greatly as he tried to break free. Yet he was suppressed and whittled down by the 9 Bends Yellow River formation, completely unable to stand against Yen Zhaoge's strength as he was unable to break free from Yen Zhaoge's grasp. Grabbing the other party with both hands, Yen Zhaoge circulated the concept of the cyclic heavenly scripture that could overturn the heavens and earth. two tremendous distorting forces, coming from completely opposite directions, were simultaneously exerted on Qing Shizi's arm. A lofty, late, immortal bridge martial saint with an incomparably powerful fleshly body had had one of his arms directly twisted off by Yan Zhaoge in the end. Ah! Qing Shizi growled. One of his arms had been forcibly ripped off from his shoulder by Yan Zhaoge, separated from his body. As soon as it left his body and became an independent existence, that arm appeared incomparably fragile to Yan Zhaoge's strength. Beneath the crushing force that resembled the axis of a millstone, Qing Shizi could only watch helplessly as that severed arm was reduced to mush of flesh and blood in midair. Yan Zhao Ge! A loud roar now resounded from the other side. As Yan Zhaoge gazed back, a black shadow obscured the light before him. Wielded by Peng, the massive riding wind heavenly vessel that was wreathed in flames, was already right before his eyes. Peng He roared madly, controlling the riding wind heavenly vessel to slam straight towards Yan Zhaoge's head. The massive divine vessel was like an elephant rushing towards an ant when compared to Yan Zhaoge, who was the size of a human. Ha! Yan Zhaoge stood proudly where he was, not moving as he turned and punched out with a palm. At the first instant of contact, the great vessel that resembled the pressure of Mount Tai was directly halted where it was by Yan Zhaoge, unable to move at all. At the second instant of contact, where the riding wind heavenly vessel had come into contact with Yan Zhaoge's palm, it mightily shattered as a large hole was split open. Chapter 993. It was as though a massive elephant that trampled the heavens and the earth had suddenly slammed into a mountain that was even tougher than it. Peng He wielded the riding wind heavenly vessel, instantly causing it to bleed profusely. The massive vessel that had actually been majestic a moment ago, as it crushed all things, strangely halted where it was the next moment. At the same time, a large hole was directly smashed open on the hull of the vessel by Yan Zhaoge. With that hole as their center, numerous terrifying cracks rapidly extended in all directions, extending to various parts of the entire riding wind heavenly vessel. Faced with Yan Zhaoge's terrifying power, the massive vessel that traversed the 9 heavens was shattered to pieces at this moment. The violent force rebounded as the unconscious martial practitioners of Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope on the deck were all jolted to death, just like that. Yuan, Xianqing, and Taoist leading Mist, who had been seated in the meditative position, all along resisting the corrosion of the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, both directly vomited out a mouthful of blood. With their auras and minds thrown into disorder, they were hard-pressed to resist, as they instantly felt dizzy. Blazing King, Peng, he who directly controlled the riding wind heavenly vessel, also vomited out a mouthful of blood. Having already been injured by Yan Zhaoge in the first place, his injuries involuntarily worsened. With this, the influence of the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation on him deepened. At this moment, Peng He felt as though the changes of life and death in the acupoints of his body that resembled stars had all ceased at this moment as well. Their circulation trajectories began to become monotonous and rigid. This caused him to feel as though his cultivation base had fallen back to the 7th level of the martial saint realm. Yan Zhaoge flew up, ascending the great vessel that was already virtually on the verge of breaking apart. As he came before Peng He's eyes seemed on the verge of imploding. Yan Zhaoge's expression was mild. Blazing Flame Saber, Blazing King's Saber, it looks like you are Blazing King Peng He. This Yan knows that Zhuang Chaohui is your son-in-law and has always been on good terms with you. Yan Zhaoge raised a palm. I will send you down to accompany him now. It is just that you might not be able to catch up to him, having already been gone for some time. Amidst his words, he struck down towards the top of Peng He's head with a palm. While Peng He focused heavily on offense and lightly on defense, seemingly different from Wudong Slope's usual style. At the ninth level of the martial saint realm, he too was bolstered by 4 virtues, just that his accumulation was not as robust as Zhang Shuren's. Yet, beneath the corrosion of the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, Peng He, who had suffered a great loss in strength, was already unable to defend against Yan Zhaoge. Yan Zhao, as the palm landed, the furious roar came to an abrupt halt. Martial practitioners of Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope would obtain a chance to undergo nirvanic rebirth upon ascending the Immortal Bridge. However, after exhausting it, he would only be able to obtain another chance after he ascended to the Exalted Realm. Unfortunately, King Blazing Peng, he had already been reborn once in his previous life. Therefore, this late Immortal Bridge Martial Saint was slain by Yan Zhaoge with a single palm within this 9 Bends Yellow River Formation. After killing Peng He and feeling his life aura completely severed, Yan Zhaoge ignored Yuan Xiancheng, Taoist leading mist, and the others on the ship as he instead lowered his head and looked downwards. There, in the murky dark water of the Yellow River, golden light and fiery light suddenly shone together. Then, Zhang Shuren barely managed to resist the extreme young seal as he rose from the river. As the water of the Yellow River of 9 Bends Formation washed over him, he became more and more unsteady. If not for Yan Zhaoge having been busy dealing with Qing Shuzi and Peng He, not focusing too much on the extreme young seal, Zhang Shuren would not have been able to withstand it at all. At this moment, Yan Zhaoge paid it no heed as he flew to the side of the extreme young seal, clapping it lightly before flying towards Zhang Shuren again. However, with this clap, the light of the extreme young seal turned dazzling once more as a vigorous, tyrannical power surged once more. The roiling golden sun descended once more, directly slamming Zhang Shuren into the waters of the Yellow River once more. The riding wind heavenly vessel was shattered, Peng He was slain, and Zhang Shuren was sunk once more. All of this was but a short moment. Qing Shuzi, who had lost an arm, clenched his teeth as he watched the illusory scenes before him, while his junior apprentice brother Taoist, leading mist, was still there. Qing Shuzi was already unable to pay him any attention now. It was not that he did not want to. Instead, he could not. While it was said that 3 late Immortal Bridge Martial Saints had joined forces within this 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, they were not much different from 8th level Martial Saints to Yan Zhaoge. It was even to the extent that as time passed and their injuries worsened, they were practically like 7th level Martial Saints. What would happen to Yan Zhaoge when facing the combined attacks of mid and early Immortal Bridge Martial Saints? Peng He's death and the previous vast Spirit Mountain meet had already been displayed to the point. Qing Shuzi tapped on the ground, rapidly shifting through space as he attempted to increase the distance between him and Yan Zhaoge, of illusory coming peak. Qing Shuzi was an elite amongst his peers who possessed outstanding movement techniques. Yet, beneath the dual blows of the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation and his heavy injuries, he could only watch helplessly on as Yan Zhaoge caught up to him. Qing Shuzi's face was pale as no blood could be seen on it. Seeing that he would not be able to outrun Yan Zhaoge, much less escape the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, he simply halted. Taoist, please. Your heaven-earth within sleeve has truly broadened this Yan's horizons. Yan Zhaoge strode over. Today, within my 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, your cultivation base and strength have all been suppressed as you are unable to display your full strength. Still, this is a life and death battle between us, and not a spar. Forgive this Yen for not being calculative about my methods. Qing Shuzi, who was usually silent, stared fixedly at Yan Zhaoge. Where exactly are you from? Yan Zhaoge smiled. 8 Extremities World, disciple of Broad Creed Mountain. I thought that you already knew about this. Ha! Qing Shuzi laughed as well. This humble Taoist has thought about who I might die to if I perish. I have thought about many things. Still, before today, I had never thought that I might die by your hands. Still, as you said to Peng He earlier, Qing Shuzi laughed, someone will send you down to accompany us. This humble Taoist will be waiting for you down below. With a stern roar, Qing Shuzi extended his remaining sleeve, swinging it towards Yan Zhaoge. Midway through, a black shadow suddenly emerged from within. At first glance, it seemed like his sleeve had suddenly lengthened. It was actually a jet-black whip. Knowing that Yan Zhaoge's dark green bamboo cane could counter sacred artifacts, Qing Shuzi had not used a weapon earlier. Still, at this moment where his life was at stake, how could he care about so much? Yan Zhaoge's expression did not change as the dark green bamboo cane descended, the jet-black whip that resembled a long dragon instantly turning into a dead snake. Qing Shuzi made use of this chance to directly release his sacred artifact before extending his sleeve, executing the heaven-earth within sleeve once more. Yan Zhaoge did not evade this time as he stood unmoving where he was, allowing Qing Shuzi's heaven-earth within sleeve to collect him. Amidst the distortion of space, his figure instantly shrunk as he was sucked into Qing Shuzi's sleeve. Qing Shuzi, however, did not reveal a joyful expression. This was because the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation before him was still circulating unceasingly. Indeed, the next moment, that sleeve of his began expanding unceasingly. A bulge would occasionally appear on the surface of his sleeve, as if something was rampaging about within. Qing Shuzi suppressed it with all his might. Still, under the dual effects of the formation and his injuries, he was becoming more and more powerless. Finally, there was a loud rumbling sound. That sleeve of Qing Shuzi's directly exploded, transforming into numerous pieces of cloth that dispersed throughout the air. A mournful, terrifying sword glow lit up unceasingly. That sole arm of Qing Shuzi's was riddled with bloodstains as he was wounded all over. Perhaps I should send more people down to accompany you. Yan Zhaoge's voice resounded once more, originating from behind Qing Shuzi. The terrifying sword tapped Qing Shuzi's temple before piercing through. Chapter 994. Yan Zhaoge strode atop space, standing behind Qing Shuzi. He extended a hand, his index and middle fingers standing side by side like a sword, his fingertips jabbing at Qing Shuzi's temples. The brutal sword radiance pierced through Qing Shuzi's brain, piercing right through his skull and emerging from the other side of his temple. This peak expert of the 9th level of the Martial Saint realm perished within the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, just like that. In the entire world beyond worlds, Qing Shuzi was publicly acknowledged as the expert with the greatest hope of attaining the human exalt stage within a short period of time. With the potential that he had displayed at his age, he even had hopes of becoming a martial monarch. Not only was his current strength superior, but he also had a bright future ahead of Peng He, Zhang Shuren, and Guan Lide. But life was impermanent, and swords had no eyes. After today's battle, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. No matter how great his future was, it was all for naught. Seeing Qing Shuzi's lifeless body plummeting downwards from midair, Yan Zhaoge shook his head slightly. He descended as well, and the muddy waters of the yellow river below parted. There, Zhang Shuren was suppressed by the extreme Yang seal. He could only barely hold on, unable to push the extreme Yang seal away. As the yellow river of Nine Bends Formation continued to corrode him, his cultivation level and strength continued to drop, and he became more and more powerless. At this moment, he just happened to see Qing Shuzi's corpse fall into the water. He could not help but feel sorrow and despair. Then, Yan Zhaoge's face appeared before his eyes. I didn't expect it. Zhang Shuren was calm at this moment. He just kept shaking his head. You killed Marshal Nephew Li Jin, helped the southeastern Golden Court Mountain capture Marshal Nephew Wang Hui, and ruined Zhao Wei's plan to bring back the Phoenix Bone. At that time, no one in our sect thought that things would end up like this. It's only been 6 years, not even 7. Yan Zhaoge was even calmer as he seemed to be having a casual chat with Zhang Shuren. It was a little longer than that. For around 3 years, this Yan spent it in a lower world where time flowed faster than in the world beyond worlds. For me, from the time I killed your sect's disciple until now, about 11 or 12 years have passed. Zhang Shuren heaved a long sigh. 11, 12 years. Ha! What a good 11, 12 years. Compared to you, old people like us have lived our entire lives in vain. But don't be too complacent. Qing Shuzi, who just died at your hands, will often make others feel the same way. At this moment, the old man's body was hunched, and he couldn't bear the burden anymore. However, there was only indifference on his face at this moment. Those who kill will always be killed. There will always be someone stronger than you. You are stronger than us, so you can kill us. However, there will always be someone stronger than you. Let's see who will kill you. Up above, the extreme young seal transformed into a brilliant sun, its radiance dazzling even above the 9 bends of the dim yellow river. However, the scorching sunlight also turned into destructive flames that gradually engulfed Zhang Shuren's body. Yan Zhaoge smiled slightly. At least it's not you. Zhang Shuren's body was swallowed by the blazing sun. A clear phoenix cry rang out from the embers of the flames, and a figure gradually reappeared. Yan Zhaoge did not even look carefully as he struck out with a palm. Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong slopes experts underwent nirvanic rebirth. Under normal circumstances, after being reborn, one's cultivation level and strength would be no different from before they were reborn. It wasn't as simple as preserving one's life. But now that he had been reborn in the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, the negative effects of the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation still existed. After undergoing nirvanic rebirth, Zhang Shuren's cultivation base and strength had still been greatly whittled down, as he was only roughly equivalent to when he had been at the 7th level of the Martial Saint realm. As Yan Zhaoge's palm descended, bolstered by 4 virtues and wielded by the Wutong Divine Palm, Zhang Shuren was hard-pressed to withstand it. This longtime elder of Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope had followed in the footsteps of his fellow disciple, Peng He, and died in the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation. Gusts of chilly wind blew and black fog covered the sky. Only the murky, dark yellow river was surging, that riding wind, heavenly vessel that was close to breaking apart, completely disintegrated at this moment. The broken pieces of wood from the ship floated on the surface of the river, but as the waves rose and fell, they gradually sank and were swallowed by the river. On the ship, Taoist leading Mist, Yuan Xiancheng, and the other southern martial practitioners were drowned by the 9 bends of the Yellow River along with the sunken ship, vanishing without a trace. Yuan Xiancheng used his left eye to refine the Phoenix doppelganger, so he still had a chance to undergo nirvana. But at this moment, it had lost all meaning. Standing atop the turbid waves that surged to the heavens, Yan Zhaoge silently watched all of this. Hu, Xia Guang, and Pan Pan appeared beside him, all of them having different expressions on their faces. Xia Guang's gaze, that was currently on Yan Zhaoge, contained some fanaticism and reverence besides envy and yearning. Pan Pan shrunk in size, lying beside Yan Zhaoge in a rather sycophantic manner as he rubbed against him. Hu imitated Yan Zhaoge's actions, stroking his lower chin as he said, "A seeing divinity martial saint slaying 3 late immortal bridge martial saints of the 9th level of the martial saint realm. This is truly unprecedented. Young master, you have really gone overboard this time. It would be hard for your name not to shake the heavens." Yen Zhaoga smiled, bringing his palms together before his chest before forming a seal together. Gusts of chilly wind began to calm, the dense black fog dissipating as well. The dim yellow river water began to recede, the heavens and earth of Circumference Mountain reappearing. The water returned to the Dynasty River, the great river continuing to surge from north to south. It was as if nothing had happened earlier at all. Seeing the light of day once more, Yen Zhaoga turned to look towards the east. There, sword light lit up as a few figures appeared. The one at their head was a white-haired old woman whom Yen Zhaoga was familiar with. It was precisely the southeastern swords mistress, a late immortal bridge martial saint of the southeastern Yang Heaven Territory's Golden Court Mountain. Wudong Slope had Zhang Shuren guarding over the border of Circumference Mountain. Golden Court Mountain naturally had experts stationed in the neighboring Royal Reed Sea as well. All these years, it had been this old woman before him who had been guarding over the area most of the time. Yen Zhaoga was on friendly terms with Golden Court Mountain and was very familiar with the southeastern swords mistress as well. While she had a strict and upright personality, the swords mistress similarly admired Yen Zhaoga's talent, as she rather thought highly of this young man who had just risen up. It was just that she was still greatly shocked upon seeing Yen Zhaoga now. She had also been paying attention to the happenings at Circumference Mountain at all times. Suddenly sensing that something seemed wrong here, she hurriedly led some people over to investigate, who knew that just having arrived at the border, she would see gloomy clouds and chilly winds howling, as she was completely unable to see what was going on within. The southeastern swords mistress was very familiar with Zhang Shuren's Wudong Phoenix perching formation. Yet this formation before her was foreign to her. She tried to enter, yet felt dizzy as she was nearly trapped within. The ancient name of the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation surfaced within her mind, causing the southeastern swords mistress to be even more shocked. Yet she was unable to ascertain who it was that had set up this formation before her. She could only silently observe and not provoke them for now. Finally, the formation gradually dissipated. The swords mistress was also a resolute person, as she directly led her people across the border, entering the southern blazing Heaven Territory, who knew that it would have been better if they had not seen it. As they did, everyone was rendered dazed on the spot. There was only Yen Zhaoga, who seemed completely unaffected as he smiled, cupping his hands towards them. Swords mistress, long time no see. Chapter 995. Gazing over, Yen Zhaoga saw that besides the southeastern swords mistress, most of the others present were familiar faces. Besides Golden Court Mountain martial practitioners, Yen Zhaoga even saw Pavilion Lord Gu Hong of the North Sea Sword Pavilion and other martial practitioners who were active in the Royal Reed Sea. Having been saved by the Shadow Mountain Sword King Long Hanhua that year, Gu Hong had been able to return to the North Sea after the Grand Xian dynasty had been destroyed and rebuild his sect. It was just that the North Sea Sword Pavilion had been virtually wiped out that year, its vitality having been greatly damaged as it had still been recuperating all these years. Not seeing anyone from Broad Creed Mountain, Yen Zhaoga guessed that his father, Yen Di, had still yet to emerge from seclusion. The others might still be in the Royal Reed Sea, not having followed the southeastern swords mistress into the vicinity of Circumference Mountain. After all, Broad Creed Mountain was in the west of the Royal Reed Sea, very close to the border between the two territories. With a major incident suddenly occurring at Circumference Mountain, Broad Creed Mountain was naturally on high alert. Little friend Yen, what exactly is this? The southeastern swords mistress composed herself and asked after greeting Yen Zhaoga. Yen Zhaoga answered simply, returning from a foreign dimension. The dimensional passageway just so happened to be in the endless mountain range of the southern blazing Heaven Territory. On the way back, I had to clash with people of the southern blazing Heaven Territory. arriving at Circumference Mountain, with treasured branch suppressing peak, Zhang, Shuren blocking my way, and blazing King Panghe chasing after me, I could only make use of the terrain here to set up a formation. The southeastern swordsmistress gaze hardened. If this old woman is not wrong, this formation of yours actually seems to be that legendary 9 bends Yellow River formation. That's right, Yen Zhaoga nodded candidly. It is precisely the 9 bends Yellow River formation. Looking at the solemn expressions on their faces, he smiled. When this Yen was adventuring outside, I once entered a cave manor that was of the direct lineage of the Emperor of the Yellow River Dragon sect. Oh, the southeastern swordsmistress expression eased slightly. Everyone else exchanged looks, seeming rather confused. The southeastern swordsmistress explained, in pre-Great Calamity times, immortals occasionally descended into the mortal realm from the heavenly court's divine palace above the 9 heavens, establishing their legacies. One of the seniors established a sect, the Yellow River Dragon sect. He called himself the Dragon sect's great emperor and raised a great commotion. The Yellow River Dragon sect is of the Jade Clear lineage. It has 2 core supreme martial arts. One is the cyclic heavenly scripture, one of the earlier Heaven 3 scriptures of the 10 primordial heavenly scriptures. The other is the Dragon Gate Profound, art created by the Dragon Gate Emperor. However, the Grand Protective Formation is the 9 bends Yellow River Formation. Rumor has it that the 3 sky fairies of the Prime Clear lineage entered the heavenly court after they were conferred as gods. Many of the secret arts and profundities of the 3 Immortal Island were brought into the heavenly court's divine palace above the 9 heavens. The Dragon's Gate Emperor's 9 bends Yellow River Formation probably originated from there. Unfortunately, during the Great Calamity, the Dragon's Gate Emperor and the Yellow River Dragon's Gate disappeared in the long river of history. What this old lady knows about them is only from some ancient records. As the swordsmistress said this, she looked at Yen Zhaoga. I have long heard that your broad Creed Mountain has the legacy of the cyclic heavenly seal. Could it also originate from the cave manor of that Yellow River Dragon sect? That being said, the old lady's gaze was still scrutinizing and cautious. During Yen Zhaoga's great battle against the star-plucking practitioner Guan Lai that year, the immortal ending sword had left a wound in the heavens and earth of the royal reed sea, which had only dissipated after a long time. Putting the blame on Guan Lai's head would give an explanation to the people in and out of the southeast. However, it was impossible for the swordsmistress and the others to not be suspicious at all. Now, with the addition of the 9 bends Yellow River Formation, the contrast between the 2 was even more extraordinary. As the swordsmistress said, our clan's cyclic heavenly scripture originates precisely from the cave manor of the lineage of the Yellow River Dragon sect. Yen Zhaoga's face did not turn red, nor did his heart leap. Apart from that, there is naturally also the Dragon Gate Profound art. Saying thus, Yen Zhaoga turned and punched towards the air beside him. His quintessential essence turned into a surging river in midair. As the river water twisted, it formed a giant whirlpool. Countless vortexes were hidden deep within, continuously colliding with each other, forming a terrifying might that could destroy the heavens and the earth. This Yen has only read through the Dragon's Gate Profound art and has not practiced it in depth. I only have a superficial understanding of it, and only have the appearance of it. I have made a fool of myself. Saying thus, Yen Zhaoga retracted his palm. His Dragon Gate mysterious art was the real deal. The southeastern swordsmistress looked quietly at Yen Zhaoga. She had never seen the Dragon Gate mysterious skill or the other unique skills of the Yellow River Dragon sect with her own eyes. She had only seen some descriptions in ancient books. From the external appearance of Yen Zhaoga's attack, it was exactly the same as described in the ancient texts. That was very good. It was fine, as long as he could explain it to the others. While the sword's mistress was straightforward, she was able to differentiate between friend and foe. It was rare for her to be confused about many things like Guan lied or Long Hanhua from earlier. Little friend Yin, you are truly blessed. With you, it is no wonder that Broad Creed Mountain is where it is today. After praising him, the sword's mistress did not continue on this topic, as she instead asked, "You just said that apart from Zhang Shuren, Peng He has also arrived at Circumference Mountain?" Yen Zhaoga patted Pan Pan's head beside him. Pan Pan emitted a low cry, flying down to the ground. Apart from Zhang Shuren and Peng He, there is another expert of the 9th level of the martial saint realm, Yen Zhaoga said, of illusory coming Peak's lineage, the head disciple of the Heaven Emperor, Qing Shuzi. Hearing this name, the southeastern swordsmistress's expression turned solemn. While he was much younger than her, as a late immortal bridge martial saint, Qing Shuzi's aura surpassed hers as well. The two had never clashed before. Still, having personally witnessed Qing Shuzi in action that year, the southeastern swordsmistress knew that she was probably inferior to him. Zhang Shuren, Peng He, Qing Shuzi. These 3 late immortal bridge martial saints would be able to cause those beneath the human exalt realm to feel suffocated just by standing side by side. If they suddenly attacked the southeast, the sword's mistress knew that she would definitely not be able to withstand them with just her own strength, as she might even perish on the spot. As for them now, Yen Zhaoga swiveled his head, seeing Pan Pan flying over once more. Currently, there were a few corpses on Pan Pan's back. Some of them had died horrifying deaths, as they were completely disfigured. This Yen did not hold back, resulting in some of the corpses being hard to identify. Yen Zhaoga said, rather apologetically. "Still, those who battled me at Circumference Mountain are all here, not a single one missing." As the martial practitioners of the southeast pondered over the meaning of Yen Zhaoga's words and looked at those corpses, they were all rendered dazed on the spot. The southeastern sword's mistress hurriedly stepped forward, her gaze fixated on a corpse that was missing an arm. That was precisely Qing Shuzi's corpse. While his arm had been broken by Yen Zhaoga and his head had been pierced through by a sword glow, his appearance had not been affected in the slightest. Having seen Qing Shuzi in person before, the southeastern sword's mistress was naturally able to recognize him with a single glance. It was just that with this single glance, this longtime elder of the southeast, who had weathered many trials and tribulations, was rendered completely dazed. The next moment, as she regained her wits, the swordsmistress's first reaction was to scan the surrounding area. She was searching for any traces of other experts in the vicinity. Still, she found nothing. There could only be one explanation for this. These experts who had been slain had all been killed by Yen Zhaoga alone. How did he do it? Even with the 9 bends Yellow River formation, the old lady rarely lost her composure as she swiveled her head in shock, looking at Yen Zhaoga in bewilderment. Chapter 996. The southeastern sword mistress couldn't help but be shocked. What did Qing Shuzi dying at Yen Zhaoga's hands signify? This meant that if she were to clash with Yen Zhaoga, she would very likely be slain. A late immortal bridge martial saint had been slain by a seeing divinity martial saint. Before today, this was something that was practically unimaginable to the southeastern sword mistress. But now she had to recognize the problem. This was especially so when, according to Yen Zhaoga, it was not just Qing Shuzi who had perished in the 9 bends Yellow River formation. Zhang Shuren and Peng He had also perished. These two had both died beneath Yen Zhaoga's cyclic heavenly seal. Their heads were battered and bleeding, their skulls shattered as their appearances could only barely be distinguished. After being corroded by the 9 bends Yellow River formation, his body was no longer as strong as before. Others would find it hard to distinguish her from her outer appearance and clothing, but the Southeastern Sword's mistress was no stranger to her. As a senior elder of the South and Southeast sects, she had been in contact with Zhang Shuren and Peng He for a long time. If one were to say that Yan Zhaoge had forged a corpse with the deceased Qing Shuzi by the side, there was clearly no need for that. This caused the Southeastern Sword's mistress to feel even more shocked. Zhang Shuren and Peng He were both late immortal bridge martial saints as well. The martial arts they practiced were all passed down from Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope. Each of them had their own specialties, and their strength was extraordinary. The Southeastern Sword's mistress could not guarantee that she would definitely be able to kill Zhang Shuren or Peng He in a one-on-one battle. And now, they had clearly all died at Yan Zhaoge's hands. Could it be that the might of the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation he set up far surpasses expectations? The Southeastern Sword's mistress was bewildered. Previously, even though they had truly barged into the formation, when the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation had just appeared and the situation was unclear, the Southeastern Sword's mistress had once probed the might of the Grand Formation. While it was very powerful, being able to suppress even the cultivation bases of late immortal bridge martial saints, it was still impossible for it to slay a martial practitioner like him within a short period of time. Moreover, Qing Shuzi and the other two were traveling together, and from the looks of it, there were other southern martial artists as well. The Southeastern Sword mistress swept her gaze around, already seeing Yuan Xiancheng, Phoenix pupils Yuan Xiancheng, the disciple that the Southern Exalt Zhuangshen was most proud of, a peak figure amongst the younger generation experts of the Southern Blazing Heaven territory. However, such a figure had also perished at Yan Zhaoge's hands. Immortal weapon. Now, the Southeastern Sword's mistress thought of another possibility. While it was similarly inconceivable for a seeing divinity martial saint to wield an immortal artifact, the Southeastern Sword's mistress really could not think of any other methods that Yan Zhaoge could employ to slay Qing Shuzi and the others. However, she could not sense the remnant aura of the immortal weapon. This contradicted her deduction once again. Even though the sword mistress was experienced and knowledgeable, she was still at a loss at this moment. Yan Zhaoge ignored everyone's gazes that seemed like they were looking at a monster as he continued. Apart from Qing Shuzi's trio, there was also Wudong Slope's Yuan Xiancheng and another person of illusory coming peak. Its Taoist leading mist, Emperor Qian's direct disciple. The Southeastern Sword mistress said bitterly she had never seen Taoist leading mist in person, but she had seen images of him. While the Heaven Emperor did not have many personal disciples, all of them were renowned in the world beyond worlds. The Southeastern Sword's mistress looked at those corpses, already recognizing Taoist leading mist. In the announcing Peace Mountain range to the west of Circumference Mountain, I actually first clashed with Zhang Shuren and Yuan Xiancheng. Afterwards, they retreated to Circumference Mountain with Qing Shuzi, Peng He, and the others chasing after me. Yan Zhaoge said, "Fortunately, the river of the Dynasty River flowed through Circumference Mountain, allowing me to establish the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation. Otherwise, I really would not have been able to do anything to them." The Nine Bends Yellow River Formation enveloped the entire Circumference Mountain range. Besides Zhang Shuren and Qing Shuzi's group, the other martial practitioners of the South who lived here were all drowned by me as well. The surging waters of the Yellow River had previously flooded the entire Circumference Mountain range, truly resembling an apocalyptic flood. Still, under Yan Zhaoge's control, while the river water was ferocious, it did not invade the commoners of the secular world. Wherever there were signs of human habitation, the flood bypassed them as it was just a false alarm. Still, the other martial practitioners were not so fortunate, as they were all washed by the Nine Bends Yellow River. While Yen Zhaoge did not mind killing people, he was not bloodthirsty as well. While those sects had been plundered, no one had been killed or injured, as only their grand formations had been destroyed. The true casualties had all been concentrated on the Wutong Phoenix Perching Formation and the martial practitioners on the riding Wind Heavenly Vessel. If the Southeast wants to take over the region of Circumference Mountain, the remaining local martial practitioners would probably be powerless to resist. Yen Zhaoge said, "Over at the announcing Peace Mountain Range, a considerable number of martial practitioners of the South have been slain by me as well. Vast Spirit Mountain, one of the two peak sects, had their headquarters broken down by me, their chief Taoist East Spring slain by me as well." Advancing towards the announcing Peace Mountain Range from the southeast, there should not be much resistance there. In order to prevent the martial practitioners of the southeast from receiving them or making use of this chance to launch an attack, the southern Blazing Heaven territory had previously kept the news of Yen Zhaoge's battle strictly under wraps. Only now did the people of the southeast learn of this matter. A Golden Court mountain martial practitioner beside the southeastern sword's mistress said with a dazed expression on his face, announcing Peace Mountain Range's Vast Spirit Mountain, Taoist East Spring. "I seem to have heard of this person before. He should be a mid-immortal bridge martial saint." "That's right." As Yen Zhaoge said so, a thick iron whip that resembled the tail of a dragon appeared in his hand. This is the supreme treasure of his Vast Spirit Mountain. At the same time, a sword that flickered with purple light appeared in his other hand. Apart from that, there was another person at Vast Spirit Mountain who possessed rather outstanding sword arts. Still, he did not seem to be a martial practitioner of the announcing Peace Mountain Range. Everyone was simultaneously shocked. 2 high-grade sacred artifacts. The southeastern sword's mistress stared at that sword for a moment before suddenly saying, "The Purple Sea Sword, the sword of the Purple Tide Swordsman, Zhao Zhun of the Southern Blazing Heaven Territory's Bright Connection Sea." She paused for a moment before continuing, "He was also a mid-immortal bridge martial saint." She gazed at Yen Zhaoge. Hearing Yen Zhaoge's words, she already understood. Yen Zhaoge had been able to establish the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation at Circumference Mountain because he had borrowed the geographical advantage of the Dynasty River. Still, the announcing Peace Mountain Range did not have a great river like the Dynasty River. Thus, Yen Zhaoge had only been able to repel Yuan Xianqing there, slay Taoist East Spring and Zhao Zhun, and even repel Zhang Shuren of the 9th level of the Martial Saint realm. Even if he possessed high-grade sacred artifacts like the Extreme Yang Seal or even an immortal artifact, it would still not change a single fact. Yen Zhaoge himself was currently merely a late-seeing divinity martial saint. It was said that a 3-year-old child wielding a saber would first injure himself before harming others. However powerful a treasure was, if its wielder was too weak, it would not be able to display its power. Yen Zhaoge had once pursued Shin Lingzi of the 8th level of the Martial Saint realm in the Royal Reed Sea. The southeastern sword's mistress and the martial practitioners of the southeast all knew about this. Ever since then, they had long since known that this youth before them was extraordinary. Still, one against many, and one against many were two completely different things. Facing an encirclement alone, he had still defeated and slain a host of mid-immortal bridge martial saints. Borrowing the power of the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, he had slain Qing Shuzi and the other 2 late immortal bridge martial saints. Such battle accomplishments still left everyone dumbfounded and tongue-tied. A living legendary figure was nothing more than this. Someone could not help but mutter, "Fallen deity descending into the mortal realm." Chapter 9, 97. The original meaning of banished immortals was that the immortals in the heavens had been banished and were forced to wander the mortal world. Later on, It was extended to be a talented and pure Taoist figure, like an immortal who had been banished from heaven to the mortal world. Be it before or after the Great Calamity, this title was the highest praise given to geniuses of Taoism, who had yet to push open the door to immortality. The Golden Court Mountain martial artist was just whispering to himself, and he could not help but blurt it out. As soon as he said this, he felt that it was a little rash and rude. Just as he was feeling vexed, he saw that everyone around him was nodding subconsciously. The group of people came back to their senses and looked at each other in dismay. They were all a little embarrassed, but they quickly became calm again. If the strength and talent displayed by the young man before him were not worthy of the title of banished deity, then no one else would be worthy of such a title. The southeastern swords mistress was silent for a moment before she too slowly nodded. Young Master Yen is fully deserving of the title of fallen deity. Swords mistress overpraises me. Everyone overpraises me. Yen Zhaoge smiled. As for how this place should be handled afterwards, we still need to come up with a plan. The southeastern swords mistress shook her head, sighing, "Let's not talk about the announcing Peace Mountain range first. As long as the southern exalt does not return to Circumference Mountain, Wudong Slope will not be able to maintain their foothold here. The Dynasty River was there and would not change its course. It continued to flow through the mountain range of Circumference Mountain, with the river vein of the dynasty here. Yen Zhaoge did not even have to remain here permanently, as Wudong Slope had lost control over this place. As long as the southern exalt Zhuang Shun did not return, it would be futile even if they came to occupy this place. Whenever Yen Zhaoge was in a good or bad mood, he would come here and immediately drown the 7 armies once more. After today's battle, the eastern border of this southern blazing heaven territory was no longer under the jurisdiction of Wudong Slope. What made Wudong Slope even more vexed was that the matter was not over yet. The source of the Dynasty River was not at Circumference Mountain, but in the distant Central June Heaven Territory. Starting from the Central June Heaven Territory, the Dynasty River surged all the way, passing through many regions of the Central and Southern Territories. Circumference Mountain was just one of them. In the north, there are many places that flow through, and in the south, there are more. These places were bordered by Circumference Mountain. However, due to the natural chasms separating them, they were not passable from the southeastern Yangheaven territory. Still, it was actually the same as Circumference Mountain in that it was also facing the threat of Yen Zhaoge. Because of the existence of the Dynasty River, the entire eastern region of the southern blazing heaven territory from north to south, Wudong Slope could no longer maintain a stable footing. Of course, Yen Zhaoge would not be able to occupy all the places by himself. With his current cultivation base, it was also impossible for him to borrow all of the Dynasty River veins within the entire southern blazing heaven territory and transform them into the 9 bends of the Yellow River. But no matter where he went, the southern martial artist would not be able to live in peace. Having left an environment like Circumference Mountain and a water vein like the Dynasty River, it was hard to say how much strength Yen Zhaoge possessed. Here, however, the lives of Qing Shuzi and the other 2 had already sufficiently proved Yen Zhaoge's authority. It could even be predicted that other places in the world beyond worlds that had similar massive rivers would not be safe in the future. There was someone here that they needed to be vigilant at all times. Even if they were vigilant, it might not be of any use. This is equivalent to having been conquered by you. It will naturally be up to you and Broad Creed Mountain to deal with. The southeastern swords mistress said very straightforwardly. Of course, there was no need to kill all the southern martial artists here. Facing such a huge threat, Wudong Slope was unable to provide any help. The native cultivators would naturally choose to submit to the people who truly controlled this place. As for whether or not there would be people moving in from the southeast, that was another matter. This yen might not be able to stay permanently in one place. My broad Creed Mountain has only just established itself in the world beyond worlds. Yen Zhaoge smiled. Following this, many things will still require the sword's mistress and the various seniors of Golden Court Mountain to decide. Anyway, no matter what, it was impossible for them to ignore him and broad Creed Mountain. When he felt that the time was right, or that there was a need for that, he could make a move on Circumference Mountain at any time. And now, the southeastern Yangheaven territory could use Circumference Mountain as a springboard to advance deeper into the Announcing Peace Mountain range and other places. Looking at Yen Zhaoge, the southeastern sword's mistress nodded slowly. With the foundation you have established, what comes next will be much easier. Zhang Shuren, Peng He, and Yuan Xianqing died together. Wudong Slope's vitality was greatly damaged. Now that the southern exalt Zhuang Shen was not present, Wudong Slope was virtually facing a heaven-collapsing calamity. The southeastern experts could completely suppress the southern experts and give them a good beating. Yen Zhaoge alone had caused the two sides, who had originally been evenly matched, to instantly lose their balance. Since that is so, this yen will first return to the southeast. Yen Zhaoge smiled, cupping his hands towards them. I have not been home for some time already. The sword's mistress and the others all smiled. Hadn't Yen Zhaoge's original intention this time actually been to return to Broad Creed Mountain? It was just that whether it was intentional or not, his journey home this time had been too grand and spectacular, causing half of the southern Blazing Heaven territory to collapse all at once. After taking his leave of the southeastern sword's mistress and the others, Yen Zhaoge returned to the southeastern Yangheaven territory's royal reed sea. From this day onwards, his name as the fallen deity spread like wildfire. The first person to mention this was a martial practitioner of the southeastern Exalt's lineage of Golden Court Mountain. As a longtime elder of Golden Court Mountain, the southeastern sword's mistress, it rapidly spread throughout the surrounding area. It was not just in the southeastern Yangheaven territory, as it spread throughout the entire world beyond worlds. The southern Blazing Heaven territory, which neighbored the southeast as the backdrop for Yen Zhaoge's long journey, this time reacted the most intensely. A seeing divinity martial saint had directly become the public enemy of the south. Yet, as the name of Yen Zhaoge as the fallen deity spread, while the martial practitioners of the south grit their teeth, a considerable number of them were unable to say anything in response. While the southern exalt Zhuang Shen was not present, the southern Blazing Heaven territory still had as many experts as there were trees in a forest. Yet a young man who was a seeing divinity martial saint had rampaged through the south, battling for billions of kilometers as he had killed his way back to the southeast. No one able to stop him. In the Battle of Vast Spirit Mountain, he had fought 1 against 3, slaying the chief of Vast Spirit Mountain. Crouching Dragon Old Man Daoist East Spring, slaying the purple-tide swordsman Zhaojin of the Bright Connection Sea, beating the number 1 descendant of Wudong Slope, Phoenix Pupils Yuan Xianqing, to undergo nirvanic rebirth twice. He had defeated the late martial saint of Wudong Slope, Treasured Branch Suppressing Peak, Zhang Shuren, finally trampling over the entire Vast Spirit Mountain. At Vast Spirit Mountain, there had been over 100 martial practitioners of the south. None of them had dared to face him, as they had all been frightened into fleeing. Afterwards, the Heaven Emperor's disciple Qin Shuzi, Wudong Slope's longtime elders Blazing King, Peng He, and Treasured Branch Suppressing Peak, Zhang Shuren, had gathered at Circumference Mountain, surrounding and suppressing Yen Zhaoge. Apart from that, there had also been the mid-immortal bridge Yuan Xianqing and Daoist Leading Mist, as well as numerous martial practitioners of Wudong Slope who had participated in the capture. In the end, however, the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, which had only existed in legends of the current world beyond worlds, had reappeared in this world. Yan Zhaoga's 9 bends Yellow River Formation had buried Qing Shizi, and the other 2 late Immortal Bridge Martial Saints eternally at Circumference Mountain. It had already been extremely rare for so many experts of the entire world beyond worlds to die in a single battle in recent years. This time, however, they had all perished at the hands of a seeing divinity martial saint. The battles of Vast Spirit Mountain and Circumference Mountain had shocked the entire world beyond worlds. Chapter 998, Central June Heaven Territory, Kunlun Mountain, Ingenious Flying Peak. Golden light flickered within a cave manor on Red Lotus Cliff. On the ground, a massive 8 trigrams diagram was circulating unceasingly, a Taiji diagram at its center. A woman was seated in the meditative position on the Taiji diagram. She wore red clothes and a white skirt with a silver fox shawl over her shoulders, her beauty shocking and eye-catching. This was none other than the daughter of the brocade Emperor Fu Yunxi, Fu Ting, who was hailed as the Grand Red Lotus. She sat quietly within the Taiji diagram and the 8 trigrams formation, a middle-aged man standing outside the 8 trigrams formation. Golden Court Mountains, Zhang, Yunying said it herself. It should not be wrong. That middle-aged man shook his head slightly, seemingly finding it hard to believe whilst also seemingly sighing in admiration. With Zhang Yunying's temper, it is impossible for her to brag for someone else. Zhang Yunying was the Southeastern Swordsmistress' original name. There were already few in the Southeastern Yang Heaven Territory who knew of her, as everyone respectfully addressed her as Swordsmistress. Hearing his words, Fu Ting smiled. If it is young Master Yan Zhaoga, I believe that he has such capabilities. I also told you earlier that young Master Yan's talent and strength surpass mine. I am not being humble. That middle-aged man sighed. While that is true, it is still unexpected that even Qing Shizi died at his hands. If not for young Master Yan and Senior Zhang informing us, we would not have thought that Qing Shizi had already mastered the heaven-earth within sleeve before becoming a human exalt. Fu Ting said, "It is often said that Qing Shizi has a chance of surpassing his predecessor. It is indeed not false." The middle-aged man slowly shook his head. That might not be so. The Heaven Emperor is also someone who keeps a deep and unfathomable secret. What everyone knows is that he only mastered the heaven-earth within sleeve after becoming a human exalt. Still, he is probably the only one who knows the truth. It should be said that what we and others saw was when he revealed that he had already mastered the heaven-earth within sleeve when he was still a human exalt. Who knows when exactly he mastered it? Hearing this, Fu Ting nodded in deep agreement. Senior Apprentice Ant is right. If not for Qing Shizi being forced to the brink of death by young Master Yan this time, no one would have known that he had actually already mastered the heaven-earth within sleeve. The Heaven Emperor, who had already pushed open the door to immortality, could never be overestimated. As the daughter of the Brocade Emperor, Fu Ting was deeply aware of how powerful emperors were. To think that back then, there were those of the Southeast who called that young Master Yan the solar luminary young master, and there were many who were unconvinced. The middle-aged man clicked his tongue in praise. Now, there are few who dare to question the title of fallen deity. While Yan Zhaoga's fame had previously spread far and wide, there were few who truly cared about it besides those of the Southeastern Yang Heaven Territory. At that time, the title that people had bestowed upon Yan Zhaoga was the Solar Luminary Young Master. As the name suggested, at least half of the glory of this title originated from the high-grade sacred artifact, the extreme Yang seal originating from the legendary exalted solar luminary. As for Yan Zhaoga himself, most of them were still observing him. As Yan Zhaoga's cultivation base grew higher and higher and his experience grew deeper and deeper when he ascended the immortal bridge, even if he was indeed not the descendant of the exalted solar luminary, his title of Solar Luminary Young Master would also gradually be confirmed. Still, ever since Yen Zhaoga had rampaged through the southern blazing heaven territory and caused numerous heroes to bow down to him, shocking the heavens with his battles at Vast Spirit Mountain and Circumference Mountain, there had instead been fewer people who addressed him as the Solar Luminary Young Master. Of the titles that people praised, only one remained: fallen deity Yen Zhaoga. Speaking of this, Fu Ting thought of something as a smile suddenly surfaced at the corners of her mouth. Young Master Yen himself seems to have never acknowledged the title of Solar Luminary Young Master on any occasion. On the contrary, he has admitted more than once that it was a fortuitous coincidence that he had obtained the extreme Yang seal. Hearing her words, that middle-aged man smiled as well. A proud youngster indeed has the capital to be so. Fu Ting smiled, yet was suddenly unable to smile anymore. She lowered her head and looked at the Taiji diagram of the 8 trigrams formation that she was currently in. The senior apprentice uncle before her did not know what all this was for, only thinking that it was the brocade emperor's assistance in Fu Ting's cultivation in seclusion. Still, Fu Ting knew the meaning behind it. She was thinking of how Yen Zhaoga had also gone to the lands of the immortal court with her that year, knowing of the existence of the immeasurable heavenly lord and the immortal court. Yen Zhaoga had claimed that he had not felt anything unusual because he had comprehended chaos in the dim radiant 12 arts. Still, thinking of her father's stern expression back then, Fu Ting really could not feel anything optimistic. In the eastern vast heaven territory bordering the central June heaven territory, there was a mountain range known as Fog Tea Mountain. The sect that was active at the eastern foothills of Fog Tea Mountain was known as the Rinsing Flower Sect. The Rinsing Flower Sect was not a local sect of the world beyond worlds, as it originated from a lower world. Some of its experts had ascended to the world beyond worlds after breaking through to the seeing divinity stage, finally stabilizing their footing in the vicinity of Fog Tea Mountain, successfully establishing their sect. Quite a number of years had passed since then, as they were now rather famous at the eastern foothills of Fog Tea Mountain. While the Rinsing Flower Sect focused most of its attention on the world beyond worlds, accepting disciples as they did their best to raise their strength and expand their influence, they still valued the lower world that they originated from very much. Still, for the disciples of the Rinsing Flower Sect of the world beyond worlds, heading to that lower world was no different from being exiled as a punishment. Therefore, no one had ever been willing to go. It was just that some unlucky fellows would be sent down every few years. Of course, it was not that they would never return. Another batch of people would replace them every few years. This could also be considered one of the traditions of the Rinsing Flower Sect. The disciples who were going to be sent down this year gathered together in private, voicing their grievances. The elder is definitely using his position to avenge a personal grudge. Someone said hatefully. The others all chimed in, exactly. Having offended him, they would be sent down to the lower world. Amongst them was a young female disciple who had just entered the sect not too long ago, as she appeared to be merely a martial scholar. She seemed a little distracted as she casually agreed. Someone consoled her. Don't worry too much, junior apprentice Sister Lee. We will be able to return a few years later. The female disciple nodded. Yes, senior apprentice brother is right. Have you heard? A supreme genius, Yen Zhaoga, has appeared in the southeast. The name of the fallen deity has already spread throughout the world beyond worlds. There is no one who does not know of him. The person who had spoken first now said, I heard that he originates from a sect of a lower world, having established himself in the world beyond worlds now. If I could live like him, my life would not have been in vain. Everyone's eyes lit up as they all said, What do you know? The fallen deity is still young. His current accomplishments are still far from his peak. Everyone discussed amongst themselves, discussing various pieces of information whose authenticity was unknown, as they were all incomparably envious. That female disciple joined in as well, looking rather excited, as if she was looking forward to it. After everyone had dispersed and returned to their lodgings, she was the only one left. The girl surnamed Lee swiped her finger across her cheek. Her face trembled slightly like water, changing for just that one instant. Still, it returned to its original state a moment later. Good, very good. The girl laughed by herself, feeling much happier than when she was in front of others. The look of envy and yearning had vanished, replaced by joy and gratification. After a while, she shook her head lightly. I really want to go take a look. Sadly, I can't. Chapter 999. Central June Heaven Territory. The peak of a certain mountain in the Kunlun Mountains. A black-robed youth sat cross-legged on a boulder at the top of the cliff. Behind him, a middle-aged man appeared. Yen Zhaoge slew the Heaven Emperor's head disciple Qing Shuzi and seventh disciple Taoist, leading Mist. The middle-aged man said in a heavy tone, after the Heaven Emperor learns of this, he will definitely not let the matter rest. He's still in the outer realms and can't return. But once he does, he'll definitely go to the southeast. The black-clothed youth stood up from the boulder, turned around, and asked, what does senior brother want to do? The middle-aged man pondered for a moment before replying, I want to go southeast. However, now is not the time. There has to be a suitable time, or else it would be too rude. The black-robed youth didn't say anything and waited for the rest of the sentence. I haven't personally come into contact with him or fought him, so I can't be sure. The middle-aged man continued, Master, there's something that doesn't make sense. I'm not questioning Master's decision, but the identity of the other party has to be confirmed. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he raised his head to look at the horizon. I've already sent another message to Master, but I don't know when I'll get a reply. The black-robed youth's eyes flashed, and he looked up into the sky as well. The reply has already arrived. So fast this time. The middle-aged man was slightly shocked as he stared at the sky. A moment later, the void suddenly split open, and a ray of light descended from the sky, landing on the peak of the mountain. Seeing this, the two at the top of the mountain fell silent. As you wish, Master. The black-clothed young man raised his hand to retract the light and didn't say anything else. The middle-aged man laughed bitterly after a long while. Master, you haven't even seen him. How can you be so sure that he's the person you're looking for? The age difference is too big, the black-clothed youth said. Since Master has already given instructions, he must have his reasons. If that's the case, then we should prepare early, the middle-aged man said slowly. In the northern profound Heaven Territory, on a frozen land, the entrance to a domain passageway stood there. However, unlike ordinary domain passageways, this door that led to another world, from the outside looking in, was pitch black like a black hole. Within it, there were faint flashes of lightning. At this moment, there was a woman standing outside the entrance of the domain passageway. The woman was dressed in white and wielded a black saber. Her black hair was tied behind her head with a simple piece of cloth. It was none other than Feng Yunsheng, who was outside alone. In order to keep a low profile, she removed the black-bordered blue robes worn by Broad Creed Mountain's core true disciples, leaving only the white robes worn by Broad Creed Mountain's disciples. Feng Yunsheng turned her head to look towards the south and chuckled softly. With your personality of showing off your divinity in front of your lover, you must be acting sanctimonious on the surface, but who knows how pleased you are in your heart. This time, Yen world. News of this spread even in the bitter, cold lands of the extreme north on the other side of the world beyond worlds. Bright moon above the sea, Even the ends of the earth share this moment. Thinking of what Yan Zhaoge had once said, Feng Yunxing muttered to herself. After a moment, she smiled. Chun, after a saint, I world, mountain she I has, I she cloud, mountain world, mountain yun and Feng, peak, the cloud, the guan, I sect, mountain, Dao, Dao sect, I yen Feng sect, I sect, Feng. She wrote some words in midair, inscribing them on the spirit orb. The spirit orb transformed into a streak of light, being swallowed into the belly of the hawk. Next, she raised her hand, the hawk taking to the air, flying off towards the distant south. Watching the hawk leave, Feng Yunxing's gaze turned resolute as she turned and entered that pitch-black dimensional passageway, accompanied by her entry. Not long after, the dimensional passageway gradually vanished. There was only the howling of cold wind on the icy plains of the frozen earth, as no one could be seen. Southeastern Yangheaven Territory, Royal Reed Sea. After many days, Yan Zhaoge finally returned to Broad Crescent Mountain. Looking at Broad Crescent Mountain before him, Yan Zhaoge chuckled. It feels good to be home. Ahu gave a simple and honest laugh. Young master, your name has shaken the 4 seas this time. I think it must feel even better. Yan Zhaoge coughed dryly. Really, it was a daunting experience without any mishaps this time. In the Battle of Circumference Mountain, Zhang Shuren and Peng He aside, that Qing Shizi really cannot be underestimated. I did not know beforehand that he had actually mastered the heaven-earth within sleeve. If not for the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation weakening his cultivation base, if he had taken me by surprise, I might have faced the risk of being overturned. He swiveled his head to look at Ahu, Xia Guang, and Pan Pan, saying in a meaningful and heartfelt tone, when you clash with others in the future, you have to be careful at all times. Your opponent might have some unexpected, hidden killing moves. Having been ambushed by someone, no matter how many methods and ultimate moves you have, you will still not be able to execute them in time, as you will only be able to die, regretfully. Xia Guang immediately straightened his expression, nodding solemnly, yes. Pan Pan blinked his eyes and yawned. Ahu gave a simple and honest laugh as he sent via sound transmission. In the end, he was still defeated by you, young master. Of course, Yan Zhaoge's expression did not change even in front of Xia Guang as he replied via sound transmission without any trace of politeness at all. They conversed and laughed as they descended towards Broad Crescent Mountain. Yan Zhaoge's heart suddenly jolted. Gazing over, he saw a handsome man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s with graying hair standing on the peak of the heaven-rising peak, currently smiling at him. It was none other than his father. Yan Di, you've emerged from seclusion? Gazing over carefully, Yan Zhaoge could vaguely feel that the many acupoints within Yan Di's body that had already been refined to see divinity were shaking slightly at this moment. Yan Di had not concealed anything from him. Therefore, Yan Zhaoge could feel that it was like the stars of the universe had formed a system of their own as they circulated with a unique rhythm. This was precisely the mark of a martial saint who had ascended the immortal bridge. Yan Di, who had been in secluded cultivation ever since leaving the minor no-hatred Tao arena and returning to the world beyond worlds, had successfully broken through his bottleneck this time, advancing from the late-seeing divinity stage to the early immortal bridge stage. This entailed that Yan Di had attained the 7th level of the martial saint realm. Broad Creed Mountain finally had an immortal bridge martial saint. Thinking of this, Yan Zhaoge could not help but not know whether to laugh or to cry. The 2 of them and Broad Creed Mountain could also be considered to be famed in the world beyond worlds now. Yet, only one of them had ascended the immortal bridge today. I just feel that this is a little mocking. Yen Zhaoge cast aside the random thoughts in his mind, still feeling extremely happy. Yen Zhaoge was happy for his father having ascended the immortal bridge, as well, feeling no less joyous than his own improvement. As he congratulated Yen Di shook his head, smiling. "You caused a great disturbance in the south this time." Broad Creed Mountain had just received the news as well. There was more than a single late immortal bridge martial saint in pursuit. Yen Zhaoge chuckled. "If I didn't cause a great disturbance, I wouldn't have been able to return." Father and son returned to the Great Hall, where the other higher echelon members of Broad Creed Mountain were waiting for them. Yen Zhaoge's personal narration was naturally much more detailed than the rumors, as everyone sighed in admiration upon hearing it. Afterwards, when they returned to their lodgings, only father and son remained. Yen Zhaoge smiled, asking, "Father, did you encounter anything after leaving the minor no-hatred Dao arena that year?" Chapter 1000. Yen Zhaoge had always known that his father was supremely talented. Still, having been separated in the minor no-hatred Dao arena due to Mars Halberd, Yen Di had immediately entered secluded cultivation as soon as he had returned to the world beyond worlds. Yen Zhaoge had still felt that this was rather unusual, now that Yen Di had emerged from seclusion successfully, having attained the 7th level of the Martial Saint realm, the early immortal bridge stage. This seemed to confirm this as well. "I did indeed have some gains." Yen Di looked at Yen Zhaoge. "You said earlier that the Taoist temple you went to this time was not the Grand Clear lineage, but the Prime Clear lineage?" Yen Zhaoge nodded. "That's right." As he said this, black light suddenly flickered within his pupils. Yen Zhaoge formed a sword seal, threads of black sword chi surging from his fingertips. Even with Yen Di's cultivation base, he could feel that intimidating killing intent and death intent. That was a concept that seemed intent on slaughtering all life forms, slaying all life forms within the world. Amidst its cruel coldness, it appeared calm and natural. It seemed to be proclaiming a principle. Death was the final destination of all life forms. Past or present, near or far, there would always be such a tribulation. As long as it was a life form, it could be slain. Yen Di could feel this sword chi exceptionally clearly because he had studied and cultivated in the life creation heavenly scripture. This supreme martial art of the Jade Clear direct lineage and the sword Dao that Yen Zhaoge was currently executing were like two sides of the same coin, opposing life and death. Yet they were connected to each other. In principle, they countered each other, yet also reinforced each other. Still, in actual combat, Yen Di could basically tell that this sword Dao just happened to counter the life creation heavenly scripture to a certain extent. More accurately speaking, it was not just the life creation heavenly scripture. Martial arts that cultivated in the power of life could be countered by this sword. For example, the Phoenix true form scripture of the Southern Blazing Heaven Territories Phoenix Ritual Mountains Wudong Slope lineage, or the Eastern Vast Heaven Territories Remote Cloud Mountains Clear Light Locale, and so on. Of course, against martial practitioners who cultivated in other martial arts, this tyrannical sword Dao that was filled with killing intent to the extreme was similarly a terrifying killer. While devilish martial arts were weak in the Eight Extremities world, they had flourished for a time in the vast ocean world. In the world beyond worlds, a small number of devilish martial arts actually circulated as well. Cultivators themselves did not care if they were good or evil, but when cultivating demonic path martial arts, it was often more bloody and involved more killing. However, if one had to find a martial art with the strongest killing intent in this world, even the numerous supreme arts of the devilish Dao could not compare to this sword art that Yen Zhaoge was currently executing. Moreover, this sword Dao did not feel evil or manic, because in itself, it signified the end of life. The sword Dao of the Prime Clear Direct lineage Could it be the legendary, immortal slaughtering sword of the numinous treasure, Four Swords? Yendi quickly realized he had never seen anyone use the immortal culling sword, but he had heard of it. After all, this sword technique was too famous. Exterminating immortal sharp, slaughtering immortal dead, trapping immortal all around red light. Yen Zhaoge nodded slowly. The prime clear direct lineage legacy that I obtained in the Taoist temple is precisely the immortal slaughtering sword. If the immortal trapping sword could destroy time and space, and the immortal slashing sword could slay all living things, then the immortal slaughtering sword could slaughter all living things. Yen Zhaoge said, "Let's not talk about Circumference Mountain. In the Battle of Vast Spirit Mountain, Zhang Shuren and Yuan Xianqing's defeat was not unjust. Many principles of my newly created sword art, slaying Azure Dragon, actually benefit from this immortal slaughtering sword. I remember you saying that when you attempt to ascend the immortal bridge, besides the primordial heavenly scriptures of the Jade Clear Direct lineage, you will also need a supreme martial art of the Grand Clear Direct lineage and the Prime Clear Direct lineage." Yen Di said, "In heading to the Taoist temple this time, you originally believed that it was the cave manor of a descendant of the Grand Clear Direct lineage, hoping to obtain the legacy of a senior of the Grand Clear Direct lineage there." "That's right." Yen Zhaoge spread his hands apart. "Who would have thought that it would actually be of the Prime Clear Direct lineage? That's fine too. Anyway, I just happen to lack supreme martial arts of the Prime Clear lineage as well. It can be said that I have lost something on the swings and gained something on the swings. It is just that I am still considering where to obtain a supreme martial art of the Grand Clear next. Still, I did not make a wasted trip to the Taoist temple this time." He chuckled. "Those of 3-Foot Mountain and Wudong Slope are probably going to be greatly disappointed." At this point, Yen Zhaoge's heart suddenly jolted slightly as he looked at his father. Seeing this, Yen Di smiled mildly. "You guessed correctly." Amidst his words, streams of qi suddenly surged from the top of Yen Di's head. Those streams of qi appeared chaotic, dim and dim as they resembled a clump of dim clouds. Specks of fragmented radiance flickered amidst the clump of clouds. They were not bright, not dazzling, not resplendent, not eye-catching. Yet they were incomparably profound as they were hard to fathom, hard to describe, hard to describe. The cloud qi expanded, blooming like a lotus flower. The borders of the petals were blurry as they were indistinguishable from the surrounding space. Yet the surrounding space, and even the world itself, seemed to be collapsing inwards with that lotus flower that resembled a nebula as its center. Primordial, peerless infinity, auspicious cloud. Yen Zhaoge nearly blurted out. His mouth opened, yet he did not utter a sound as he stopped himself at the final juncture. He composed himself, carefully gazing at it for a while, before finally letting out a long sigh. That was not the primordial, peerless infinity, auspicious cloud manifested by the primordial, heavenly lord of the Jade Clear lineage. Instead, it was a supreme divine ability obtained from the first scripture of the primordial heavenly scripture, the peerless heavenly scripture. While it also contained the concept of the vast, boundless primordial universe before the heavens and earth had been born, it was still different from the primordial, peerless heavenly scripture. If not for this, Yen Zhaoge would simply suspect that he had cultivated in a fake, peerless heavenly scripture. Peerless, primordial, peerless heavenly scripture was one of a kind, as only a single person could cultivate in it in this world. Before the primordial heavenly Lord had transcended, he had occupied that position as no one else had been able to cultivate in it. Therefore, Yen Zhaoge was truly taken aback as he looked at that nebula. But now he had an idea of what to do. It was not the primordial, peerless infinity, auspicious cloud of the Jade Clear lineage. Instead, it was Tai, the head of the Grand Cosmos 5 manifestations of the Grand Clear lineage. Yen Zhaoge now had the urge to sing loudly. He had worn out iron shoes in search of it, yet found it by chance. While this was not the Tai Fist, just based on this nebula and his foundation of the peerless heavenly scripture and the convenience of simultaneously cultivating in the three purities, the Tai Fist was already beckoning towards him, searching for a supreme martial art of the grand clear lineage. He had found a supreme martial art of the prime clear lineage, who knew that upon returning home, there would actually be a supreme martial art of the grand clear lineage waiting for him. This was a wonderful feeling indeed. Still, amidst his joy, Yen Zhaoge did not lose his calm. The scene before him was still somewhat different from the Tai that he was familiar with. Tai, the head of the grand cosmos 5 manifestations, symbolized the most primordial form of the universe. There was no light or shape, as it was silent and formless. This existence that resembled a lotus flower, whilst also a nebula above Yendi's head, did not seem to be purely Tai. Father, this concept is a little like Tai. Still, there seems to be some variation as well. Still, it is not Tai transforming into grand commencement. Instead, it seems to have stepped from the head of the grand cosmos 5 manifestations to later heaven in a single step. Yen Zhaoge voiced out his doubts. Yendi said, "You naturally have a unique understanding of the Taiji yin-yang palm as you cultivate in it. This is indeed the phenomenon of Tai. Still, there are indeed some later heaven variations as well. I call it the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, or the Grand Simplicity Splendor Lotus." Oh, Yen Zhaoge seemed to have noticed something unusual. How did you obtain this Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud? Yen Di's expression turned strange, which was rarely seen on him. Chapter 1001. Hearing his words, Yen Zhaoge could not help but look at that chaotic nebula that resembled a lotus above Yen Di's head once more. "It wasn't you who found it, but it found you?" Yen Zhaoge repeated, "On its own." Yen Di was silent for a moment before he said, "I do not believe that it was a coincidence." "What's the reason?" Yen Zhaoge pondered as he asked. Yen Di reached out with his hand, the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud above his head drifting down, transforming into a small, dim, indescribable lotus that hovered silently above his palm. From the first moment I laid eyes on this Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, I felt a sense of familiarity. Yen Di's expression grew increasingly strange. Also in that instant, I knew exactly what it was. I'm extremely familiar with the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, but as far as I can remember, this should be my first time seeing it. At this point, Yen Di paused for a moment. After a long while, he slowly said, "It's a little hard to say, but I seem to feel a mother's embrace." Yen Zhaoge had a thoughtful look on his face after hearing this, as he carefully observed the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud on Yen Di's palm. After this Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud fell into my hands, I did not need to refine it, able to wield it as though it belonged to me in the first place, just like— Yen Di considered his words for a moment before saying, "Just like it belonged to me in the first place." Yen Zhaoge pondered for a moment before suddenly asking, "That time at the Brocade Emperor's minor no-hatred Tao arena seemed to be your first time heading to extra-dimensional space?" Raising his palm lightly, the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud returning above his head as he said, "That's right, it is precisely so. I've also thought of what you've just said. Perhaps it has always been waiting for me in the outer realms. When I arrived there, it took the initiative to find me." Yen Di's expression turned tranquil. "The question is, why?" Lightly rubbing his temples, Yen Zhaoge raised his head to look at his father. "I have always been waiting for you, as if I belonged to you in the first place." You also feel a sense of familiarity and closeness. Yen Di understood the meaning behind Yen Zhaoge's words, because he himself had been doubting it for the past few days. That year, in the Eight Extremities world, when the decimating abyss caused chaos and broad Crebe Mountain met with a tribulation, trouble also arose in the family. Yen Di said slowly, "What Yen Wendao and the others said is true. I am not my parents' flesh and blood. I knew all of this a long time ago, and the one who told me the truth was my father. But in my heart, I see myself as a member of the Yen clan, and there are people in the clan who also see me as a member of the clan. To me, this is enough. It doesn't matter to me whether I become the clan leader or not. But since grandfather has passed the position of clan leader to me, I won't refuse it, and I won't disappoint him." Hearing his father's words, Yen Zhaoga nodded silently. The person who had doubted Yen Di's identity back then had a letter personally written by Yen Di's father, Yen Zhaoga's grandfather. Judging from the handwriting, it was not forged. From then on, Yen Zhaoga had a rough idea of what to do. At that time, our clan had not yet moved to the Middle Heaven continent of the Heaven Domain, but to the Zhaozhou of the Thunder Domain. A reminiscent look appeared on Yen Di's face. Father picked me up in the wilderness of the mountains. Because of my belongings, he eventually brought me back to the family. Saying thus, he took out 2 jade pendants, placing them before Yen Zhaoga. The 2 jade pendants looked exactly the same. They were a pair. They were all extremely ordinary, not all that precious treasures, but they were rather exquisite and beautiful. A word was inscribed on each of the 2 jade pendants. Yen and Di. Seeing this, Yen Zhaoga smacked his lips. It might be the surnames of 2 people. He did not say the latter half of his words. The possibility of it being a man and a woman was extremely high. However, Yen Zhaoga knew that his father would definitely have the same guess. Because of this, father brought me home. Picking up the jade pendant with the Yen character inscribed on it, Yen Di said softly. Initially, he thought that it was some disciple of the family who had lost or abandoned a child. However, after investigating many times, he confirmed that it was not the case. While I was not a member of the family, father felt that since we were both surnamed Yen, we were ultimately fated. Therefore, he personally adopted me. Saying thus, Yen Di picked up the jade pendant with the D character inscribed on it. My surname is Yen. There is naturally no need to say more. Meanwhile, my name originates from here. Receiving those 2 jade pendants, Yen Zhaoga carefully appraised them, 1 in each hand. Father and mother treated me as their own, and I did not understand all this before. Yen Di exhaled slowly. It was only when the family met with danger on the way from the Thunder Domain's Zhao region to the Heaven Domain's Central Heaven region that my father told me all of this before his death. Yen Zhaoga nodded. In other words, grandfather also did not know where you came from. Yen Di raised his head slightly, looking at the grand simplicity splendor cloud overhead. After so many years, I have not cared about where I came from. However, it seems that unknowingly the answer seems to be nearing me. Exchanging glances, father and son both shook their heads. If Yen Di's background was ordinary, it would still be fine. However, if he had some other background, it would be hard to say whether it was a blessing or a curse. The grand simplicity splendor cloud before them was indeed good, but who knew if it was a hidden source of trouble? Yen Zhaoga stopped thinking, smiling. With this grand simplicity splendor cloud protecting you, all attacks of this world against you will have to be twice the effort for half the effect, with many attacks even being unable to exert their effects. With it, when facing many opponents, you can virtually already be said to be in an invincible position even before you make a move. Yen Di's attacks had already shocked the heavens and were extraordinarily sharp. Now that he was protected by the grand simplicity splendor cloud, he had become extremely powerful both offensively and defensively. The situation of a battle can change in an instant. The grand simplicity splendor cloud is not absolutely indestructible. Yen Di was instead very calm. For example, When you faced that Qing Shuzi of the Heaven Emperor's lineage this time, his heaven-earth within sleeve was rather hard to guard against. Having been drawn into his sleeve, even if you were not injured, you would still have lost the initiative. Yan Zhaoge smiled, with this grand simplicity splendor cloud. Unless the Heaven Emperor comes to take you in, this heaven-earth within sleeve that gives most people a headache would really be unable to do anything to you. Still, speaking of the Heaven Emperor, he is currently not in the world beyond worlds. Still, it is hard to say whether he will return after receiving the news. Yan Zhaoge knit his brows slightly. We foiled his plans in the royal reed sea. Previously, he was just looking for trouble with the southeastern exalt, not focusing on us. Having slain Qing Shuzi and Daoist, leading mist this time, the Heaven Emperor now has a reason to directly make a move. Hearing his words, Yan Di said mildly, "Those who kill will be killed by others." Since the other party joined forces with those of Wudong Slope to kill you, it would also be normal for them to be killed by you instead due to their inferior skills. If the Heaven Emperor wants to come, there will only be a battle. If others are inferior to me, I will kill them. If I am inferior to others, everyone will kill me. This is a principle that every martial practitioner knows on the very first day of cultivating in martial arts. Yan Zhaoge said, "It is fine for us to kill others. Being killed by others probably doesn't feel that great. It is just that time waits for no man. The problem now is that the time we have left might be very limited." Chapter 1002, Yan Zhaoge's limited time, was not merely referring to the Heaven Emperor. The enmity between the southern exalt Zhuangshen and Yan Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain was truly irreconcilable. Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slopes lineage had a total of 3 late Immortal Bridge martial saints: Treasured Branch Suppressing Peak, Zhang Shuren, Mastiff King Peng He, and Phoenix Cry of the Southern Border, Mao Yuansheng. In the end, 2 of them had perished at Yan Zhaoge's hands. Adding on Phoenix pupils Yuan Xiancheng, who was comparable to a 9th-level martial saint, more than half of Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slopes peak experts had perished in the battle at Circumference Mountain. While Wudong Slope would not fall as long as the southern exalt Zhuangshen remained, they had also suffered a great blow to their vitality following this battle. Moreover, Zhuangshen's son, Zhuang Chaohui, had died at Yan Zhaoge's hands. Yan Zhaoge had rampaged through the south, killing and injuring countless martial practitioners of the south. As the Lord of the South, Zhuangshen would definitely not let this matter rest. He was currently in a state of no news, but once he heard the news, he would probably come to the southeast very quickly. "I'm afraid that I will have to study your grand simplicity splendor cloud in the near future," Yan Zhaoge said. Yan Di said, "This is only natural. Whether or not you can ascend the Immortal Bridge, now all depends on how much you can obtain from the grand simplicity splendor cloud. This treasure has endless uses. I can reach the next level in a short period of time and benefit greatly from it." Yan Zhaoge smiled. "With your talent and your relationship with this grand simplicity splendor cloud, you might be able to gain even more in the days to come." Yan Di said, "I feel the same. Still, it is still too early to speak of it now." The father and son immediately sat down facing each other and meditated cross-legged. The grand simplicity splendor cloud above Yan Di's head resembled a lotus flower in full bloom, its petals flickering with specks of radiance that were profound beyond compare. Yan Zhaoge raised a hand, a Taiji diagram appearing on his palm. As the Taiji diagram circulated, all things returned to the void as they gradually resonated with the grand simplicity splendor cloud above Yan Di's head. Besides the Taiji yin-yang palm, the phenomenon of chaos gradually manifested in the acupoints of Yan Zhaoge's entire body. As his foundation, the peerless heavenly scripture also began to circulate. The peerless heavenly scripture of the jade, clear lineage, shared some similarities with the Tai fist of the Grand Clear lineage. Meanwhile, as Yen Zhaoge simultaneously cultivated in the three purities, his various supreme martial arts merged into one. It was much easier for him to comprehend the principles of the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud now. Beneath the heavens, besides the owner of the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, Yen Di, there was probably only the Brocade Emperor who could compare with Yen Zhaoge in terms of speed in comprehending this Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud. Quite unique. His relationship with my father is also quite mysterious. However, as Yen Zhaoge comprehended and cultivated, Yen Di was similarly quietly cultivating as well. At this moment, due to the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, Yen Zhaoge came into some contact with Yen Di's martial concept. After the contact, his heart stirred slightly. His father, Yen Di's martial true intent, was condensed and pure, powerful beyond compare. This true martial intent belonged to Yen Di alone, as though it was innate to all, having no direct connection with whatever martial arts he cultivated in. It was the same for cultivating the clear chi energy art. It was the same for cultivating the life creation heavenly scripture, yin-yang heavenly scripture, and other primordial heavenly scriptures. Yen Zhaoge believed that even if Yen Di had cultivated in the supreme martial arts of the Grand Clear lineage, or the Sword Tao of the Prime Clear lineage, or even devilish martial arts from a young age, the result would not be much different from how it was now. Cultivating in saber arts, sword arts, spear arts, palm arts, fist arts, staff arts, etc. would not affect the initial result. Others cultivated in martial arts in order to improve themselves. Yen Di cultivated in martial arts. However, it seemed like whatever martial art he cultivated in, he would always attain his own unique concept. That unstoppable momentum of him resembled the opening of the heavens and the earth before its destruction, the circulation of the supreme principles of creation, presiding over all the martial arts that he currently cultivated in as he advanced. With momentum on my side, I will be successful in every endeavor. If he did not cultivate in the primordial heavenly scripture or even the clear chi profound art, which was considered a peak martial art in the eight extremities world, he would still not have low accomplishments if he was given a random martial art that was more outdated. That way, while Yen Di's upper limits might be limited, his lower limits would still be very high. Of all the people that Yen Zhaoge had come into contact with so far, there was no one else who possessed such a unique trait other than himself who cultivated in the peerless heavenly scripture. Not a creature in a pond, transforming into a dragon upon seeing the clouds. Also, as Yen Di's cultivation base grew higher and higher, this situation was becoming more and more obvious. Generally speaking, the higher one's cultivation base, the more difficult it would be for them to improve, the more time they would have to spend. At the martial saint realm, any random bottleneck could cause a martial practitioner to be stuck for decades or even a lifetime. Geniuses would comparatively be more ferocious, improving even faster. Still, Yen Di's rate of improvement would still leave one dumbfounded and tongue-tied. As he cultivated, it was like his saber, advancing with indomitable will, sweeping through all that stood in its way. In this process, that powerful martial concept of his had become increasingly apparent, clearer, purer, and more condensed. From Yen Zhaoge's senses, when Yen Di had first attained the seeing divinity stage, his martial concept had already been stronger than when he had transcended mortality and entered sainthood. Now, having attained the immortal bridge stage, it was even more condensed than when he had just attained the seeing divinity stage. It was just that Yen Zhaoge felt like he had seen through the clouds. When Yen Di had first attained the seeing divinity stage that year, Yen Zhaoge had already guessed something. Now, seeing Yen Di of the immortal bridge stage and feeling his martial true intent, Yen Zhaoge felt that his guess from back then seemed to have been verified. It was just that this guess seemed rather inconceivable, as it left Yen Zhaoge rather bemused. What he was more interested in was how all this had been accomplished. Looking at the grand simplicity splendor cloud above Yendi's head, Yen Zhaoge seemed to be thinking about something. The cultivation of the father and son this time was not something that could be accomplished in a single go. Yen Zhaoge had to spend a long time studying and comprehending the grand simplicity splendor cloud. In order to have more time, Yen Zhaoge would even head to the vast ocean world where time flowed faster than in the world beyond worlds from time to meditate and cultivate. Currently, the Royal Reed Sea had basically already become Broad Creed Mountain's world, as Broad Creed Mountain did not expand, as it just remained there quietly. The other powers of the Royal Reed Sea dared not overlook its existence. During this period of time, two things that Yen Zhaoge was rather concerned about had happened. The first was that news had returned from Feng Yunsheng, who had already been adventuring outside for over 2 years. Sadly for Yen Zhaoge, this was not good news at all. Due to some discoveries, Feng Yunsheng had headed to extra-dimensional space. It was hard to say whether this would be a blessing or a curse. It was completely unknown when she would be able to return. This feels wrong. Isn't it usually the husband who travels far away while the wife waits silently at home, praying for him? Yen Zhaoge smiled bitterly to himself. He naturally knew that this was a path that Feng Yunsheng, who wanted to temper herself, had to take. Therefore, he could only find joy amidst sorrow, making fun of himself. The second thing that Yen Zhaoge was rather concerned about was the visitors from Ingenious Flying Peak. He found this strange. Yen Zhaoge included. There were only a few people of Broad Creed Mountain who knew that Yendi had obtained the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud. Ingenious Flying Peak definitely did not know about it. Chapter 1003. It was to be expected that Fu Ting had not come. The repercussions of a trip to the Immortal Court were not to be underestimated. Still, those who had come from Ingenious Flying Peak were of the same generation as the Brocade Emperor and the Grand Plainness Origin Lady Tao Yu. After receiving them, Yen Zhaoge and Yendi exchanged looks. It seemed like those of Ingenious Flying Peak were indeed unaware of the matter of the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud. In having come this time, besides exchanging pleasantries, there had only been one thing they had wanted to talk about. Still, this was a matter of immense influence. Simply put, the Brocade Emperor, who had headed to extra-dimensional space after his battle with Mars Halberd, had sent back a message. Yen Zhaoge's battle at Circumference Mountain, where he had slain a personal disciple of the Brocade Emperor's lineage and 2 longtime elders of the Southern Exalt's lineage, as well as Wudong Slope, could be said to be the most influential matter in the world beyond worlds in recent times. It was fine if they could not communicate with him. Once the communication channel was clear, Ingenious Flying Peak would definitely inform the Brocade Emperor as soon as possible. This had nothing to do with Fu Ting's or Tao Yu's opinion of Yen Zhaoge, as it was only a matter of course. Rather unexpectedly, the Brocade Emperor replied very quickly. The contents of his reply even surpassed some people's expectations. He will settle the matter at hand as soon as possible, returning before the Heaven Emperor. If the Heaven Emperor is in trouble, will he act? Yen Zhaoge muttered to himself, looking at his father, Yendi, who was also frowning slightly. The Brocade Emperor Fu Yunqi was close friends with the southeastern Exalt Chao Jie. Therefore, when Chao Jie was facing pressure from the Heaven Emperor, the Brocade Emperor had been willing to help him. Still, if the Heaven Emperor turned to deal with Broad Creed Mountain, it was hard to say if the Brocade Emperor would still act. While Yen Zhaoge was on friendly terms with Fu Ting and the other disciples of Red Lotus Cliff, with the Brocade Emperor having invited him and his father to the minor No Hatred Dao arena as guests back then, it was clear that he viewed them in a different light. Still, no one could say for sure how this emperor viewed Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain, especially if he would stand up for Broad Creed Mountain and fight to the death with another true immortal? After all, in consideration of stabilizing the overall situation of the world beyond worlds, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors rarely clashed directly, as they generally restrained each other. If the Brocade Emperor knew of the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud and knew that Yen Di possessed it, it would be easy to explain. Previously, Yen Zhaoge had still had to make some preparations in order to obtain a direct lineage martial art of the Grand Clear Direct lineage from ingenious Flying Peak's Red Lotus Cliff. While the supreme martial arts of the Jade Clear lineage that he grasped were useful to the Brocade Emperor, they were not essential. But now, the situation was completely different. The head of the Grand Cosmos 5 Grand Manifestations, Grand Simplicity, was the only connate supreme martial art that ingenious Flying Peak lacked. If they could gather all of the Grand Cosmos 5 manifestations, it would be far more than just a single martial art to the Brocade Emperor and ingenious Flying Peak. From a certain perspective, if ingenious Flying Peak had to exchange the other 4 Grand Clear Connate ultimate techniques for a Tai Fist, they might be willing. He had used the Tai Fist to exchange for the Brocade Emperor's help in resisting the Heaven Emperor. With this bargaining chip, the weight was enough. The Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud entered the world beyond worlds from extra-dimensional space. Could the Brocade Emperor have sensed it? Yen Di knit his brows slightly. It did not matter if the Brocade Emperor knew about it. What he was concerned about was how the Brocade Emperor knew about it. As the owner of the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud, Yen Di had the intention and also the need to understand everything related to this. Yen Zhaoge lightly rubbed his temples. There is this possibility, but there are also other possibilities. Ingenious Flying Peak had said that the Yen father and son had only gone to the minor no-hatred Dao arena because of the Brocade Emperor's invitation. In the end, the Brocade Emperor had stood them up. An emperor standing up to seeing divinity, martial saints, did not seem like a big deal at all. Yet Mars Halberd had attacked the minor no-hatred Dao arena afterwards. Yen Zhaoge and Yen Di had been caught in the crossfire for no reason at all. Afterwards, Yen Zhaoge and Fu Ting had been stranded in the Immortal Court, helping each other out in times of trouble. Fu Ting had been able to return from the Immortal Court as soon as possible thanks to Yen Zhaoge. Therefore, the Brocade Emperor had both apologized and thanked him this time. This could be explained. While there seemed to be a gap between their current statuses, the Brocade Emperor had always been carefree and easygoing. It was not impossible. Still, this was still up for discussion. Yen Zhaoge did not intend to measure the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. Still, it was not his personality to place all his hopes on the moral integrity of others. The Brocade Emperor had left a very good impression on Yen Zhaoge up until now, and it was also true that he was carefree and easygoing. Still, it would be wrong to think that he was a warm-hearted and good person. Observing his life, Yen Zhaoge could vaguely guess that the Brocade Emperor cultivated in the lineage of the Grand Clear lineage, walking the path of Grand Oblivion. While Grand Oblivion was not heartless, the Brocade Emperor was definitely not a sentimental person like many people thought him to be. It was not without reason that he had only had Fu Ting as his only child in his later years. That was likely due to the principle of the Grand Divination number 50, of which 49 were used, Grand Unity not being used. Fu Ting's birth signified that the Brocade Emperor had transitioned from the stage of never touching a single flower to the stage of only taking a single scoop of water. This signified that his cultivation base had become purer. Still, Yen Zhaoge could not predict how the Brocade Emperor would proceed from here on out. This would directly determine the Brocade Emperor's style of doing things. From how much he cared for Fu Ting now, the situation was still rather optimistic. Of course, Yen Zhaoge had another guess. It was also related to the Grand Simplicity Splendor Cloud. Still, It was not the Tai fist. Yan Zhaoge looked at Yan Di, understanding his meaning. Yan Di said, "Wait and see. Forging iron requires one's own strength." Yan Zhaoge nodded. "This is not a reason for us to relax." Yan Di said approvingly, "That's right." While the Brocade Emperor's stance was a pleasant surprise, the most important thing for Yan Zhaoge and Yan Di would definitely still be raising their strength. Exchanging the Tai fist for the Brocade Emperor's help would most likely succeed. Still, unless it was absolutely necessary, neither father nor son would consider this possibility. Still, it was useless to just express one's determination and shout slogans in order to deal with threats that could come at any time. There had to be a practical way to do so. Amidst diligent cultivation, Yan Zhaoge was also unceasingly sorting out his thoughts. After stepping past the boundary between human and immortal and attaining the leakless true immortal stage, the arts of the human realm would no longer be able to harm them. However powerful a martial saint was, however powerful they were, they would still be unable to harm a true immortal just by themselves. This was because the two sides were no longer on the same level. If humans wanted to stand against immortals, they would have to find another way. Of course, there were no absolutes in this world. There was indeed a way for martial saints to slay immortals. In the ancient historical records, there had once been 4 exalts of the prime clear direct lineage who stood at the peak of the human realm, who had joined forces to establish the immortal exterminating formation, successfully slaying an emperor. This sufficiently displayed the great power of the numinous treasure 4 swords and the immortal exterminating formation that could extinguish the myriad heavens. Since ancient times, there had only been one way for martial saints to slay immortals without the help of external objects. Still, the immortal exterminating formation had long since been lost. For the current Yan Zhaoge, this method clearly did not possess any reference value. The Nine Bends Yellow River Formation was naturally good. Its most famous effects were losing the mind of an immortal, vanishing the soul of an immortal, trapping the form of an immortal, harming the chi of an immortal, harming the original form of an immortal, and harming the limbs of an immortal. Still, without the core immortal bewitching pill and the secluded immortal mantra, it would be unable to do anything to emperors who had already pushed open the door to immortality. Chapter 1004. Yan Zhaoge actually felt that while the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation and the 3 Sky Maidens were powerful, the most important reason for the investiture of the gods' era to have achieved such glorious feats was the supreme treasure of legend, the chaotic origin Golden Dipper. If it wasn't for the primordial chaos Golden Chalice, it wouldn't have been able to throw so many legendary experts into the 9-turn Yellow River array. The strength of the Yellow River of Nine Bends Yellow River Formation, aside from the fact that it was controlled by the 3 sky goddesses, was due to the immortal confusion pill and the secluded immortal mantra. The awkward thing was that refining the immortal confusion pill and forming the secluded immortal mantra were all immortal techniques that mortals could not achieve. As Yan Zhaoge's cultivation base increased, the power of the Nine Bends Yellow River Formation would naturally grow stronger and stronger. But without the immortal bewitching pill and the secluded immortal mantra, it was not the core. Moreover, due to the geographical limitations of the Royal Reed Sea, it was impossible to establish a formation here. Yan Zhaoge sat in the meditative position within the room, a dark green bamboo cane appearing within his hands. This was a unique weapon that Yan Zhaoge had forged for himself, having a miraculous effect in suppressing the weapons of others. With his current 7 feet and 7 segments, he could destroy a medial-grade sacred artifact with a single strike. If he were to attack a high-grade sacred artifact, even a high-grade sacred artifact would find it hard to withstand it. Only existences like the extreme Yang Seal and the extreme Yin Crown could barely withstand it. Even the evil sword Tao Tai was unable to do so. However, it was not that effective when used to hit people. Furthermore, there was a difference between immortals and mortals. The gap between immortals and immortals existed not only for humans, but also for immortal armaments and sacred armaments. While he had not tried it before, Yen Zhaoge knew that the dark green bamboo cane would not be able to beat an immortal artifact. Perhaps he could try to resist it, but if he wanted to restrain an immortal artifact, he would probably need to reach 9 feet and 9 segments. As for how to grow it from 8 feet and 8 segments to 9 feet and 9 segments, there were some tricks to it. This treasure was about to face its first bottleneck. Once he passed this trial, his future would still be bright. The difficulty of the path did not mean that they had to stop advancing because of it. It was just that for Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain, distant water could not quench a nearby fire. Comparatively speaking, the extreme young seal, which had not been able to unleash its full power all along, was about to display its true might to the world once more. As Yen Zhaoge himself ascended the immortal bridge, he would be able to fully exert the power of this high-grade sacred artifact. Among all the saint weapons, this treasure was an existence akin to a king. Still, just the extreme young seal alone is still insufficient. Yen Zhaoge lightly tapped the dark green bamboo cane on his other hand. After a while, he put away the dark green bamboo stick, and the void above his head shook slightly. There, a huge palace appeared, and faint dragon roars could be heard coming from within. The door of the hall opened, and the void inside was folded. However, in the center, where it was difficult to distinguish the distance, a seemingly inconspicuous black iron wheel floated quietly. It was precisely the dim radiant wheel that Yen Zhaoge had obtained from the dim radiant mausoleum. This treasure still showed no reaction to Yen Zhaoge's touch in the slightest, as though it was in a deep slumber. Aside from a brief reaction when it had been stimulated by the fist intent of the direct lineage martial Tao of the vast young exalt, Pei Hua, in the loathing square immortal realm of the immortal court, the dim radiant wheel had remained completely ordinary and unremarkable. However, Yen Zhaoge had never forgotten this treasure. However, this celestial armament embryo might have many different meanings behind it. It was not as simple as it seemed. Compared to the obvious danger, the unknown was more frightening. Also, Yen Zhaoge was still in the process of figuring out how this treasure would ultimately become a true immortal artifact. Based on the changes in the dim radiant lamp that day, and the relationship between it and the dim radiant wheel, it was very easy to guess that if there were 12 high-grade sacred artifacts like the dim radiant lamp, the dim radiant wheel might be completely refined successfully. When attacked by other high-grade sacred artifacts, the dim radiant wheel would indeed react passively, devouring the other party. If there were 12 sacred artifacts that were separately formed from the concepts of light and dim darkness, or light and darkness coexisted like the dim radiant lamp, would the effects be better than 12 random high-grade sacred artifacts? No, it is probably not like that. Yen Zhaoge muttered to himself. The foundation of the dim radiant will lies in the dim radiant 12 arts, the concepts of which are of the same lineage. After pondering for a moment, Yen Zhaoge retrieved an item. It was a golden wheel that circulated with light on its surface, resembling sunlight. It was precisely the treasure of the radiant light sect in the Royal Reed Sea that year, the high-grade sacred artifact, the sun-moon wheels. Still, of the sun-moon wheels that had originally been in pairs, only the sun-moon wheel remaining now, as the moon will had long since been lost. Yen Zhaoge hesitated slightly for a moment before retrieving another item. It was also a high-grade sacred artifact, a saber with a long hilt. It was the high-grade sacred artifact that he had obtained not long ago, the golden crow incinerating heaven saber that had originally belonged to 3-Foot Mountain. A pity that the high-grade sacred artifact of the vast young exalt Pei Hua was destroyed by the little sword god Long Xueji. Otherwise, it would have been more suitable. Yen Zhaoge stroked his lower chin. Still, if he had been accompanied by a high-grade sacred artifact back then, I might not have been able to kill him. After analyzing the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber for a moment, Yen Zhaoge nodded satisfactorily. While it is more of the blazing of the sun rather than the concept of the light of the sun, it is still suitable for use due to its deep understanding of the profundities of the principles of the sun. It was not that he could not bear to part with the sun-moon wheel. Instead, he was worried that with only the sun-moon wheel and a damaged sacred artifact, it would not be a sufficient use to verify his guesses. The golden crow incinerating heaven's saber was complete and flawless, being even more powerful than the sun-moon wheel alone. After concluding his thoughts, Yen Zhaoge grabbed the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber, throwing it towards the dim radiant wheel. The long saber transformed into a blazing streak of golden fire, resembling the sun as it shot through the sky as it smashed towards the completely inconspicuous dim radiant wheel. Feeling the hostility of the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber as well as its destructive power as a high-grade sacred artifact, the dim radiant wheel, which had remained silent all along, finally shook. A streak of light flew out from one of the 12 slots, sweeping towards the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber. The golden crow incinerating heaven's saber shook for a moment, the sunlight and flames dissipating as it regained its form. Then, this high-grade sacred artifact slowly flew towards the dim, radiant wheel on its own accord. That year, the King Xian spear had nearly been kept by the dim radiant wheel, just that Yen Zhaoge had stopped it. This time, he did not make a move, just observing patiently. Then, he saw the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber land within the slot on the dim radiant wheel. The dim radiant will cease shaking, the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber vanishing. After observing for a moment, Yen Zhaoge was unable to feel the dim radiant wheel becoming stronger or showing signs of becoming more complete. Instead, sunlight was emitted from the slot where the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber had been kept. Approaching it, Yen Zhaoge discovered that there seemed to be a layer of cosmic space within that slot. There was a golden crow struggling unceasingly within, the essence of sunlight on its body being drawn away by this cosmic space. A moment later, however, all of this came to an end. That golden crow looked like it had just survived a great calamity, yet was still trapped within cosmic space, unable to extricate itself. This is an image manifested after the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber was kept by the dim radiant wheel, yet it was not refined and absorbed by the dim radiant wheel, Yen Zhaoge pondered. Still, from the looks of it, it rather seems like it was as if the dim radiant wheel had despised it. Yen Zhaoge did not know whether to laugh or to cry at this discovery. Chapter 1005. What the dim radiant will disliked was not the golden crow heaven incinerating saber itself. Instead, it was the concept contained within the sacred weapon. In other words, he despised the golden crow world incinerating scripture. But to be fair, the golden crow world incinerating scripture was a rather profound martial art. If the golden crow's world incinerating scripture did not work, then the vast Yang Sutra of the vast Yang Palace would most likely not work either. The dim, radiant sect's own study of the principles of the light of the sun was also insufficient. Under such circumstances, what right did the dim radiant will have to be arrogant? What it wants is an absolute art theory that surpasses itself. Yen Zhaoge realized something. The dim, radiant emperor Yin Tianxiao is really ambitious. What he wants is to carry on the past and open up the future, unceasingly advancing upwards. Therefore, the dim radiant wheel attempts to incorporate concepts and principles that are even more profound than the martial arts manuals of the dim radiant sect. With that, the day it truly succeeds, it will be incomparably powerful. It did not necessarily have to surpass the martial arts of the dim radiant sect in all aspects. The martial arts of the dim radiant sect were all-encompassing. After Yin Tianxia's arrangement and guidance, they had been categorized into many different categories, involving many principles. The path of sunlight was one of them, as long as a certain martial art was more profound than the martial arts of the dim, radiant sect in the Tao of the light of the sun, then the dim radiant wheel would be interested. The only exception was Yin Tianxia's own dim radiant lamp, because that was the initial foundation for the dim radiant wheel. Yan Zhaoge looked at the cosmic void within the black metal wheel's aperture. After pondering for a moment, he took out another item. It was a long sword that rippled with light and flickered with purple splendor. There was a faint sound of tides coming from it, as if the vast sea had fused with it. It was the chief of the Bright Connection Sea's Purple Tide Sword sect, the Purple Tide Swordsman, Zhao Zhen, who had assisted Wudong Slope's Yuan Xianqing in the Battle of Vast Spirit Mountain earlier. In the end, he had been slain by Yan Zhaoge, his accompanying high-grade sacred artifact, the Purple Sea Sword, the supreme treasure of the Purple Tide Sword sect, having fallen into Yan Zhaoge's hands. During that great battle, this sword had nearly been broken by Yan Zhaoge. There were still many cracks on the body of the sword, as if the slightest carelessness could cause it to break into pieces. However, the vast sword intent within it was still majestic. Yan Zhaoge flicked his wrist, the purple sea sword transforming into a streak of light as it too flew towards the dim radiant wheel. In the end, it immediately followed in the footsteps of the golden crow world incinerating saber, being devoured by a hole in the dim radiant wheel. However, this time, Yan Zhaoge discovered a problem. Although the golden crow heaven incinerating blade and the purple sea sword were not in the same hole, they seemed to have gone to the same place. In the same hole where the golden crow was previously, purple tides surged out and instantly turned into a vast ocean. After pondering, Yan Zhaoge's heart jolted. This is that hole in the dim, radiant mausoleum from which the dim radiant lamp was swallowed back then. Then, upon closer inspection, he saw that the purple ocean formed by the purple sea sword undulated, rising and falling. It looked very normal. What was strange was that the cosmic void in this hole didn't absorb the essence of the purple sea like it did before. It wasn't that he didn't like it, but he didn't do anything at all. Seeing this scene, Yan Zhaoge completely understood. The sword will of the purple sea sword and the purple sea sword chi of the purple tide sword sect were derived from the profound meaning of the vast ocean. Also, this was not within the scope of the martial arts manuals of the dim radiant sect. While Yin Tianxia wished to strengthen himself by collecting all the scriptures of the world in forging the dim radiant wheel, he did not intend to expand blindly. The martial arts of the dim radiant sect were already extremely complete in his hands, as there was no need for him to continue adding branches and leaves. What he needed was unceasing improvement. The purple sea of sword chi was not what the dim radiant wheel needed. Therefore, while the purple sea sword had been swallowed, the dim radiant wheel actually did not intend to touch it at all. It was unlike the golden crow heaven incinerating blade, which had only given up after experimenting. Then, what was the concept that the dim, radiant wheel was interested in? Yin Tianxia's dim, radiant 12 arts had actually already provided a guide. The radiant light sect and the dim darkness sect had both been direct descendants of the dim radiant sect that year. It was just that due to various reasons, they had not been able to learn all of them. The martial arts of the two sects had actually originated from a portion of the legacy of the dim radiant sect that year: primordial darkness, no light, dim brightness, illusory light, eternal illumination, as well as extreme yang that was similar to the principles of the golden crow world incinerating scripture and the vast yang scripture, as well as the opposing extreme yin. These were all part of the dim radiant 12 arts. Yin Tianxia had died young, but his talent had also shocked the world. whether or not to absorb and refine the concept contained within a sacred artifact is one thing, Yen Zhaoge muttered to himself, whether or not to keep this sacred artifact is another. The two are actually separate and independent steps. While the latter serves the former and provides a foundation, they do not interfere with each other. Sensing this, a guess appeared in Yen Zhaoge's mind. He had cultivated in the dim radiant 12 arts. Still, it was mainly the final art. Meanwhile, of the previous arts, the 11th art was known as wilderness devouring. When martial practitioners cultivated in this art, they would be able to absorb the power of their enemies. This concept being used on the dim radiant wheel might be the reason why it had devoured other sacred artifacts. Yen Zhaoge gazed at the whole that manifested the universe and bore the purple sea sword and the golden crow incinerating heaven's saber after they had been devoured. If a whole does not correspond to a high-grade sacred artifact, instead corresponding to one of the dim radiant 12 arts, this whole should correspond to the 11th art, wilderness devouring. Stroking the surface of the dim radiant wheel with his finger, Yen Zhaoge thought the dim radiant emperor used the dim radiant lamp to establish a foundation for the dim radiant wheel. The absorption of the dim radiant lamp had not been due to the wilderness devouring art. Instead, it had been due to the dim radiant emperor's ritual with which he had first refined his immortal artifact. The subsequent absorption of other sacred artifacts had been due to the wilderness devouring art that had already been inscribed on the dim radiant wheel. That way, even if Yin Tianxia himself perished in the long years to come, the dim radiant wheel would still have the possibility of continuing to grow. What had allowed the dim radiant wheel to grow, or perhaps it should be said to have allowed it to advance step by step towards complete refinement, was not other high-grade sacred artifacts. Instead, it was various martial arts that could elevate the legacy of the dim radiant sect to a whole new level. Because of this, when the dim radiant wheel's merit had been perfected, the dim radiant 12 arts contained within would all have attained a whole new level. The dim radiant wheel would also be superior to its peers. Yen Zhaoge pondered for a moment before extending his palm towards that hole that represented the wilderness devouring art. The golden crow incinerating world scripture would not work, and the vast yang scripture might not work as well. However, he could try with the extreme yang scripture. Yen Zhaoge did not intend to send the extreme yang seal in, instead projecting the concept of the extreme yang scripture with his true essence. At first, the dim radiant will did not react. It was just like how Yen Zhaoge had experimented countless times with infusing his true essence. Yen Zhaoge retracted his hand. After pondering for a moment, he grabbed the high-grade sacred artifact, the sun wheel, before abruptly smashing it towards the dim radiant wheel. This time, the black metal wheel finally reacted. Light flew out from the hole, enveloping the sun wheel. Yen Zhaoge did not resist it. Still, he did not let go as he grabbed the sun wheel, making use of this chance to send his palm in as well. At the same time, he circulated the extreme yang scripture. The next moment, glorious sunlight flickered amid space, a great amount of the essence of sunlight being unceasingly extracted and absorbed by a formless existence. Chapter 1006. The extreme Yang scripture originated from the vast Yang Sutra of the vast Yang Palace. However, after being researched and perfected by more than one generation of geniuses and legendary giants, as well as referring to the flipping heavenly scripture, Yin Yang heavenly scripture, and other absolute arts, the solar god's canon that was now completed had already shown signs of surpassing the original. The vast Yang scripture and the golden crow world incinerating scripture were unable to satisfy the requirements of the dim radiant emperor Yin Tianxia in forging the dim radiant wheel. But the sun god canon could. Still, even as it merged and refined the concept of the extreme Yang scripture, The dim radiant wheel was also unceasingly extracting the radiance of the sun formed of Yen Zhaoge's true essence. Since it could smelt high-grade sacred weapons, the amount of yuan qi it required was undoubtedly an astronomical figure. Many immortal bridge martial saints who were not renowned for their abundant true essence in their martial arts would be sucked dry by the dim radiant wheel to the point of exhaustion. This was an immortal weapon, a treasure that only experts who had pushed open the immortal gate could refine. There was a difference between immortals and mortals. Even though the dim radiant emperor had already established his foundations, the following steps were not something that ordinary people could handle. Even with Yen Zhaoge's strength, he could still feel a great amount of his true essence flowing away. The rate at which he was expended was even more ferocious than when he had clashed with the longtime elder Zhang Shuren of Wudong Slope earlier. His expression was calm, his cultivation base robust, as he breathed in and out quietly, endlessly supplying power to the dim radiant wheel. There was a hole on the pitch-black iron wheel that was emitting light that grew brighter and brighter. At this moment, the seemingly ordinary and silent black iron wheel gradually emitted a surging feeling of power. The radiance of extreme yang and extreme heat illuminated the space within the myriad dragon palace, resembling an actual sun. This whole should correspond to the sixth art of the dim, radiant 12 arts, extreme yang. Yen Zhaoge understood. The wilderness-devouring art could devour and absorb the energy of others. Meanwhile, the art of the extreme yang of the dim radiant sect's martial legacies primarily drew on the majesty of the light of the sun guarding the righteous and warding off evil, stabilizing one's body. External combat techniques were big and bold, dignified and righteous, capable of both offense and defense. However, what was most praiseworthy was the internal cultivation method. The sun shone brightly, and all evils could not invade, and one's mind was clear. His usual cultivation would yield twice the result with half the effort, and at the same time, he could resist many evil and bewitching techniques that affected the soul. Now that this technique was inscribed on the dim radiant wheel, this treasure would be able to suppress evil as well as counter the tricks of ghosts. Yen Zhaoge seemed to be seeing the dim radiant wheel all over again at this moment as he appraised it. My earlier guess was correct. This means that when this dim radiant wheel reaches its peak, the dim radiant 12 arts manifesting, a single treasure will be able to perform 12 different functions. Moreover, he was proficient in all of them, not slack in all of them. If they followed the principles of the dim radiant emperor, Yin Tianxia, and could finally achieve their wishes. The dim radiant emperor, Yin Tianxia, is someone with his own ideas. Yen Zhaoge clicked his tongue in wonder. If not for his early death, his fame and achievements would definitely be far greater than what they are now. Of course, this was just an assumption. Yen Zhaoge knew all too well that if Yin Tianxia continued to live, wanting to improve, he would first have to face a problem. His dim, radiant 12 arts had come into contact with the true meaning of peerless infinity. Meanwhile, with the jade-clear lineage's first primordial heavenly scripture, the peerless heavenly scripture, weighing down on his head, his path would become incomparably narrow, making it difficult for him to move forward. Unless Yin Tianxia obtained the peerless heavenly scripture, it would be far too difficult for him to continue improving compared to others. He might even be stuck at the leakless, true, immortal stage for the rest of his life. The thoughts and principles of the dim radiant wheel might be Yin Tianxia's pondering and attempt on his own path. Could he not know that the path he had chosen was an extremely difficult one? Yen Zhaoge felt that he knew. However, Yin Tianxia had still chosen this path. While it was difficult, with little hope, he was still unceasingly attempting to break through his shackles, searching for an effective method. Peerless infinity, Yen Zhaoge muttered to himself. he had previously cultivated in the dim, radiant 12 arts primarily for the final art. This art was peerless infinity. Yan Zhaoge's original intention had been to make use of the dim, radiant sex peerless infinity art to conceal his own foundation of the peerless heavenly scripture. According to Yin Tianxia's thoughts in forging the dim radiant wheel, he naturally hoped to absorb techniques that were superior to the dim radiant sex peerless infinity art. Since ancient times beneath the heavens, who had analyzed the true intent of peerless infinity better than the peerless heavenly scripture of the jade, clear, direct lineage. With the golden sun wheel as a support, the concept of the extreme yang scripture was refined into the dim radiant wheel, transforming into the divine patterns of the art of the extreme yang that were inscribed within. As time passed, a great amount of Yan Zhaoge's true essence was depleted. This feeling was similar to when he had battled the star-plucking practitioner Guan Lai back, when he had still been at the 5th level of the martial saint realm, as he had vaguely felt exhausted. For Yan Zhaoge, who was proficient in many supreme martial arts, possessed abundant true essence, and had a rapid qi replenishment rate, such a situation was extremely rare. Still, the results were obvious. Yan Zhaoge retracted his hand, the dim radiant wheel before him regaining its original calm appearance. It was just that faint sunlight was currently emitted from one of the holes on the black metal wheel, calm and neutral. The concept within was not completely the same as that of the extreme yang scripture. At its core, it was still the concept of the 6th art of the dim radiant 12 arts, the art of the extreme yang. Still, it was more profound and pure on its original foundation. Yan Zhaoge felt gratified that as he came into contact with the dim radiant wheel now, this treasure vaguely seemed to be reacting as it no longer seemed to be in a deep slumber. From this moment onwards, this dim radiant wheel is truly related to me. It was I who received it from the dim radiant emperor, officially beginning to refine this treasure. Yan Zhaoge stroked his lower chin, retrieving another item. This was the high-grade sacred artifact that had originally belonged to the phoenix pupils Yuan Xianqing of Wudong Slope, the 5 phoenix fan. After Yuan Xianqing's death, this sacred artifact had fallen into Yan Zhaoge's hands. It was not rare for martial practitioners to have their weapons destroyed in battle. Still, with the dark green bamboo cane in hand, Yan Zhaoge was extremely advantageous in obtaining the treasures and weapons of his opponents. In the Battle of Circumference Mountain, with the 9 Bends Yellow River Formation, besides Qing Shizi and the other 2 late Immortal Bridge martial saints, he had been able to achieve victory without even having to fight. Therefore, even as Yan Zhaoge's battle accomplishments in rampaging through the southern blazing heaven territory this time had been illustrious, he had also reaped many bountiful spoils of war, as he had profited immensely, not counting those he had slain in the Taoist temple, just from the moment he had landed in the endless mountain range of the southern blazing heaven territory. He had slain over 10 Immortal Bridge martial saints of the south. Due to the scarcity of raw materials, high-grade sacred artifacts were hard to come by. Many martial saints who had ascended the Immortal Bridge could only continue using mid-grade sacred artifacts. Fortunately, the opponents in the battles at Vast Spirit Mountain and Circumference Mountain had not been low, possessing abundant resources. In the end, Taoist East Spring, Zhao Zhen, Yuan Xianqing, Zhang Shuren, Peng He, Taoist Leading Mist, and Qing Shizi had all provided Yan Zhaoge with a high-grade spoil of war. Apart from that, Yan Zhaoge had also obtained 2 high-grade sacred artifacts, as he had come from the endless mountain range, having slain countless martial practitioners of the south, including the Golden Crow incinerating heaven saber of 3-foot mountain that he had obtained from the Taoist temple. Yan Zhaoge had obtained a total of 10 high-grade sacred artifacts this time. Chapter 1007, excluding 3-foot mountain's Golden Crow incinerating heaven saber, Qing Shizi's dark dragon whip, and Taoist Leading Mist's bright barbaric Taoist robes. Yen Zhaoge had obtained 7 high-grade sacred artifacts from the martial practitioners of the South. Not even mentioning the people he had killed, just taking these spoils of war from the South was already a great blow to the vitality of the southern Blazing Heaven territory. Under Golden Court Mountain's lead, the martial practitioners of the southeastern Yang Heaven territory launched their follow-up attacks on the South very smoothly. Not only did Golden Court Mountain completely suppress Wudong Slope, but the other southeastern martial artists also had the upper hand against the southern martial artists. This was especially so as they followed the route of Circumference Mountain, the Announcing Peace mountain range, and the vast Yumao plains all the way west, following the path that Yen Zhaoge had taken to return east once more. The martial practitioners of the southeast were relaxed and happy on their journey. Having already been plowed through by Yen Zhaoge once, it would be very hard for the martial practitioners of the South to organize a strong resistance. The quality is very good. Looking at the 5 Phoenix fan in his hands, Yen Zhaoge could not help but laugh. I'm used to being extravagant. A prodigal, like me, will probably incur the wrath of many. After recuperating for some time, Yen Zhaoge gradually regained his vitality. After feeling that he had finished his preparations once more, Yen Zhaoge sent the 5 Phoenix fan into the slot of the dim radiant wheel where the wilderness-devouring art was inscribed. At this moment, Yen Zhaoge no longer had to attack, as he stimulated the dim radiant wheel to counterattack. Currently, he was already gradually establishing some sort of connection with the dim radiant wheel. With just a thought, the dim radiant wheel shook slightly. While it was not completely obeying Yen Zhaoge's instructions, the 5 Phoenix fan that had been delivered to its doorstep was still swallowed of its own accord this time. The concept contained within the 5 Phoenix fan manifested the silhouette of a phoenix amidst the cosmic space within the aperture of the dim radiant wheel. The dim radiant wheel moved slightly, but not intensely. Yen Zhaoge knew that it was the ever-bright art of the dim radiant 12 arts at work. Ever-bright, the 8th art of the dim radiant 12 arts. In the past, the scriptures of the radiant sect of the Sea of Imperial Reed, the radiant illumination art, originated from this. This included the inextinguishable radiant body, the endless radiant palm, and other secret arts. Light always shines, eternal and inextinguishable. A cultivator's breath was long and steady, and their true essence was vigorous. They were good at protracted battles, and at the same time, their defensive power was extremely strong. Some of the characteristics of the concept were similar to Wudong Slope's Phoenix True Form Scripture. Although it was not as good as the Phoenix True Form Scripture, it was still very outstanding. However, although the external characteristics were similar, the underlying principles were fundamentally different. Therefore, after the initial tremors, the dim radiant will fell silent once more. The way to refine this celestial artifact was to figure out and refine the principles and intents of the other celestial artifact to improve oneself, not to dissect and dissect the other celestial artifact. Therefore, when the target was unable to improve itself, it would not make any moves. The current 5 Phoenix fan and the purple sea sword were both because of this. Still, Yen Zhaoge had only been using this 5 Phoenix fan as a medium and bridge in the first place, supplying his martial concept to the dim radiant wheel. However, it was not the peerless heavenly scripture. The reason was none other than the fact that the peerless heavenly scripture was too profound. Firstly, Yen Zhaoge himself was still in the midst of unceasingly studying and comprehending. Secondly, the peerless heavenly scripture was far superior to the final art of the dim radiant 12 arts, the art of peerless infinity. If they were to blindly merge them, it was very likely that the peerless heavenly scripture would turn the tables on them. However, the foundation of the dim radiant wheel was the dim radiant 12 arts in the end, with the peerless heavenly scripture as the foundation. Yen Zhaoge, who had yet to push open the door to immortality, would not be able to successfully forge an immortal artifact. The final result of this would be both sides suffering heavy losses as they all parted ways. Still, as Yen Zhaoge's cultivation base grew higher and higher, the dim radiant will also nearing completion, it would be best if things could turn for the better at that final moment. Therefore, Yen Zhaoge was currently providing another supreme martial art to the dim radiant wheel, the Dark Moon Pill Scripture. The target he was aiming for this time was the fifth art of the dim radiant 12 arts, the art of extreme yin. This art was cultivated in by martial practitioners using the cold, tranquil nature of extreme yin to cause life force to wither and the soul to wither. It was one of the few sinister arts of the dim, radiant 12 arts, being close to the devilish Tao. When used against enemies, it would formlessly harm them. It was worth mentioning that it was countered by the art of extreme yang of the dim, radiant 12 arts to a certain extent. Meanwhile, a portion of the Dark Moon Pill Scripture had a similar effect. Yen Zhaoge's understanding of the internal history of the dim radiant sect following the Great Calamity was comparatively limited. Still, having read through the art of extreme yin of the dim radiant 12 arts, he vaguely had a feeling. The seniors of the dim radiant sect, or Yin Tianxia himself, had most likely obtained a remnant version of the Dark Moon Pill Scripture, combining it with their martial arts as a result, finally producing the art of extreme yin. The Dark Moon Pill Scripture did not merely expound on those brutal, vicious concepts. Still, the remnant version that the dim radiant sect had obtained seemed to only touch upon these. Now that Yen Zhaoge was providing the complete Dark Moon Pill Scripture, the fifth of the dim radiant 12 arts would be able to advance to the next level, its foundation becoming more robust, as it would no longer be a completely unorthodox sword. Seeing yet another hole on the black metal wheel from which a deathly pale, cold radiance was projected, the corners of Yen Zhaoge's mouth arched upwards. Of the two holes that were right next to each other, one emanating vast, majestic sunlight, while the other emanated cold, tranquil moonlight, as they seemed rather unique in their own right. Yen Zhaoge's following days were extremely fulfilling, or he would study and comprehend Yen Di's grand simplicity splendor cloud, concentrating on his cultivation, or he would attempt to refine the dim radiant wheel. Ever since returning to Broad Creed Mountain, Yen Zhaoge had virtually not left the mountain at all, as he had been fully focused on his cultivation. Having just stirred up a storm in the world beyond worlds, he instead quietened down. Broad Creed Mountain seemed to have become low-key as well. Not only did they seldom participate in the attacks of the southeastern Yang Heaven Territory against the southern Blazing Heaven Territory, they did not make any major movements even in the Royal Reed Sea. The only relatively major disturbance was that Broad Creed Mountain's chief, Yen Di, had successfully ascended the Immortal Bridge. Apart from that, it was exceptionally peaceful. It was just that no one in the entire world beyond worlds would underestimate Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain now. At the same time, many people were actually waiting for the Southern Exalt Zhuangshun to return to Phoenix Ritual Mountain's Wudong Slope, waiting for the Heaven Emperor to return to Kunlun Mountain's illusory Coming Peak. At that time, whether Yen Zhaoge and Broad Creed Mountain were a newly risen legend or a short-lived shooting star would truly be revealed. Whether it was Wudong Slope, who was currently badly battered by Golden Court Mountain, or illusory Coming Peak, who had remained silent after the deaths of Qing Shuzi and Daoist Leading Mist, they were probably all waiting for that moment as well. In the world beyond worlds, 5 years had passed since the battle at Circumference Mountain. Within a cave manor on Broad Creed Mountain, Yen Zhaoge sat facing Yen Di and Yen Di. I intend to make another trip to the vast ocean world. Yen Zhaoge said calmly, I cannot be sure when the Heaven Emperor will return or when the Southern Exalt will return. Still, I will do it as soon as possible. Yen Di nodded, Go ahead, Yen Zhaoga said. During this period of time, I will have to trouble you and the sect to help me investigate something. He handed over a jade slip to Yen Di. Carefully measure the flow of the earth veins of the Royal Reed Sea according to the methods and procedures laid out within. See if you can discover anything special, similar to the heaven-bearing effecate formation. Yen Di raised his brows as he roughly read through it and saw some clues. Yen Zhaoga lightly tapped his temple. Many a time, returning to the very beginning, the solution to a problem might be hidden there.